across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Monday afternoon. There's loads to talk about, including a Talk exclusive coming your way a little bit later on about rape gangs. This is a really interesting one. It's about people who infiltrate different organisations that are designed to help people who are victims of rape gangs, and there have been family members of perpetrators who've attempted to infiltrate one of the organisations that we're going to speak to. This is an exclusive interview. It's coming up later in the programme, and you're definitely going to want to hear it. We're talking about the big political story of the day as well, big implications for all our country. This is the proposals by Labour, the Home Secretary. We're going to hear from her during the programme. She's up in the House of Commons about what they're going to do to crack down on illegal migration, taking jewellery, for example, from would-be immigrants, people who come across in small boats. Do you support this plan? This is probably the toughest thing Labour's due to come out with. I'll tell you who doesn't support it. About 20 Labour figures, mainly MPs, some members of the House of Lords as well. Some have called it inhumane and cruel. We'll get that perspective on the air as well. Let me know what you think about all of this. 0344 499 1000. We'll speak to Maxie Allen, who is one of our colleagues here in this building. He complained about his daughter's school. He sent a number of emails and messages to the school. Next thing he knew, there were police officers on his doorstep. They arrested him, they seized his device, they held him for over 10 hours. We'll be talking to him live in the studio. He's just got compensation, him and his partner, of £20,000 from the police. Because guess what? They shouldn't have arrested him. It was an outrageous abuse of their powers, in my opinion. We'll talk about the BBC as well. They say they're determined to fight any Trump legal action. We'll speak to Trump's former campaign chairman as well. Lots to discuss. We'll also talk about if you've young people who are maybe getting out of school at the moment, they may be interested in this, children or grandchildren, or maybe just young people who watch the show anyway. If you're 16 or 17, you're likely to get the vote, and the rules could change. In fact, there could be polling booths in schools, and we could be allowed to vote over a number of days, not simply one day polling day. So things could change in that regard. What do you think about that? 0344 499 1000 is the number to call about that, or any issue you want to talk to me today about. You know me. Every day, as often as possible, I get people on the show, and whoever you are, whether you want to ring in, text in, send me a voice note, whatever you want to do, your views are so important to us here at Talk. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word Talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a voice note, less than a minute please. We'll listen to those and play out as many of them as we can. Tech Up Dave is on the case with those. You can also send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring. That number again, 0344 499 1000. Lots to discuss between now and 7. Stay with us here on Talk. Well, June's been in touch already and says, having worked in an inner city senior schools for over 20 years, none of the 16-year-olds I worked with were political. Football, makeup, computer games, their phones and grunting, yes. Politics, no. Well, we will talk to one young person, Grace, a little bit later on, who actually went to my old school, Portadown College in Northern Ireland. One of the politics teachers has been very helpful there, getting Grace involved. So we're going to get her on the air a little bit later on to talk about that alongside Joe Twyman, King of Polls, who will join us too. The Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, she is going to set out the immigration crackdown, all the plans for that later this evening. We'll take a bit of that from the House of Commons, but let's have a look at what she posted on her social media to explain this whole plan earlier today.
On Monday, I will announce the most significant changes to our asylum system in modern times. Today, I want to tell you why. Across Europe, asylum claims are falling, but in Britain, they are rising. In the last 4 years, 400,000 people claimed asylum here. Over 100,000 are housed and supported at taxpayers' expense.
She's right, certainly in terms of asylum seekers, the numbers as well. So far, people coming over in small boats illegally has been 38,987. That's the 2025 figure so far. And this month alone, November, there have been 2,038 people. Since Starmer became Prime Minister, 62,229 people. Those are the figures as we speak right now. There's a lot of talk of a huge rebellion from Labour MPs, quite a few of them very unhappy. People like John McDonnell, Bel Ribeiro-Addy, Clive Lewis, perhaps not a shock to those who know the Labour Party. But Tony Vaughan, the MP for Folkestone and Hythe, he says these asylum proposals suggest we have taken the wrong turning. The rhetoric around these reforms encourages the same culture of divisiveness that sees racism and abuse growing in our communities. Do you agree with him? What do you think of that? 0344 499 1000. Abid Sam Mohammed, the MP for Sheffield Central. For more than a decade, we've seen that hostile policies don't fix the asylum system. They just create chaos, cost and deeper division. The latest proposals repeat the same mistake. Rachel Maskell, the dehumanisation of people in desperation, is the antithesis of what the Labour Party is about. Well, let's see what the Conservative Party think. The Tories have offered their support.
What we're seeing from the Labour government is steps in the right direction, so we want to encourage them in that right direction. Of course, we have a fully comprehensive borders plan. Some of what we've seen Labour announce is similar, but not as much as what we've done. We can see that the Labour backbenchers don't like this, so I have offered that we will support the government in going in the right direction.
Kemi Badenoch there, the leader of the Conservatives, leader of the opposition. This was the view of the Reform UK Deputy Leader Richard Tice.
The reality is, however well-intentioned the Home Secretary is, A, she hasn't got the support and confidence of her own party, but B, while still being a member of the European Convention on Human Rights and still having the Human Rights Act in its current form, she just won't be able to deliver what she's talking about. I do think it's slightly ironic. If we had said 2 months ago in our party conference what she said over the weekend, we'd been caused all sorts of nasty, beastly names.
That's a very interesting point from Richard Tice. Let's pick it up with Isabel Oakeshaw, Talks International editor. Isabel, Richard's right there when he says that if Reform UK, or even the Conservatives, put forward these plans, which are pretty strong, certainly in what the original intent is. We'll see if it actually gets through, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if a party that wasn't as much on the left as Labour is put these forward, they'd be pilloried for it, wouldn't they?
Well, they're certainly very tough sounding, and I do think that Shabana Mahmood seems to mean it now she's Home Secretary, although I've just spotted on social media something circulating, which is an old video of her when she was just a backbencher, calling for an amnesty on all illegal immigrants in the country at the moment.
Yeah, I think that was in 2019 she said that, so she's certainly changed her tune in 6 years.
I mean, she really has. Again, this is a woman who once went to the beaches of Lesbos to wrap blankets around refugees arriving across the Mediterranean in illegal boats. So she has performed something of a political full circle, really, on this, if she's to be believed. But I actually think she does mean it. And why? Because she's actually a pretty intelligent person who can see what most of us can see, which is that this crisis really is, as she put it, tearing Britain apart. But all too predictably, we've already got coming out of the woodwork those on her own side, normally, Labour MPs and left-wing activists who are crying foul at this and saying, you know, this is more akin to something you'd expect parties of the right to do. And it will require primary legislation, a lot of what she intends to do. And I think she's going to have quite a rough ride getting that through.
Yeah, we have Stella Creasy, the MP for Walthamstow, saying this is not just performatively cruel, it is economically misjudged. Simon Offer, the MP for Stroud, we should stop the scapegoating of immigrants because it's wrong and cruel. Kat Eccles from Starbridge, I am massively disappointed and angry about what the Home Secretary is saying. I've got a list of 17 MPs and one Lord who are all apparently against this. And this is kind of day one, actually, that they're putting this out there. Similarly to the problems that Keir Starmer had getting his welfare plans through, this could be very embarrassing for the government if it goes through simply with Tory and Reform UK support, perhaps. Certainly Kemi Badenoch saying she'll support the government in this, when actually many Labour MPs could be coming out and voting against this.
Well, I mean, I suppose to a certain extent Shabana Mahmood and the government will get what they want, which is a lot of noise about them trying to do things that sound tough on illegal immigration. What I don't think they'll get is any demonstrable difference. I don't think that voters are going to feel much different in the next few years about what's happening with illegal immigration in our country, because none of this is going to stop the boats. You know, they are still going to come pouring across the channel in dinghies unless the government has come up with some other measure, which we don't yet know about. So it's not going to stop the boats coming. And yet we're still going to have as well all the inevitable human rights-based challenges to whatever it is, all the different things that she is trying to achieve. And, you know, worthy as it may well be to say at this point, well, you'll have to stay in the UK 20 years before you can become a fully fledged British citizen. You know, that's 20 years of still being in our country. And what most voters are really wanting to hear is that a lot of people are going to be kicked out.
And I wonder, after 17 and a half years that people are in this country, they say they're going to look at this every sort of 2.5 years. I do wonder how many people are going to say after 17 and a half years, actually, you may have bought a house here, you may have a job here, you may have kids here, you may have married someone from here, actually you've got to go back to Eritrea because it's now safe. I mean, I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, I'm simply wondering about the practicality and how realistic it is that that would happen, because you can talk tough on this, but actually if you've got indefinite leave to remain for 20 years rather than 10 years rather than 5 years, it doesn't make a huge difference to your life, especially as the level of administration that is needed here. I mean, you're talking about a heck of a lot more bureaucracy as well. I'm not saying that shouldn't happen, but if you're going to check people every 2.5 years, I wonder whether that will be done properly or whether it'll simply be a tick box exercise. The Home Office, of course, is often where you know, the civil service is one of the most bureaucratic and difficult parts of the civil service to actually get something through.
I mean, I think, I'm afraid it's all a nonsense, this 20 years thing, and the whole thing about, well, we'll return you to your country of origin if it becomes safe. I mean, how on earth is that going to be assessed? You know, I suspect that the threshold that will be applied for safety will be extraordinarily high. You know, at the moment, apparently, we've got peace in our time in Gaza, but I very much doubt that the people living in Gaza feel that there's peace in our time at this point. So does that mean that people are now going to be able to be returned to Gaza?
And there's so many different excuses as well with Afghanistan, for example, and just because a country is stable doesn't necessarily mean it's safe. I wonder if you could get your perspective, Isabel, as well on these thousands of people protesting in Crowborough about 600 lone male asylum seekers in an army camp on the edge of the town. This is an interesting story. Big protest happened yesterday, and we have a number of people very, very angry about the fact that 600 lone male asylum seekers are going to be at an army camp on the edge of their town. About 2,000 people attended. Locals say they've already installed panic alarms in their homes amid safety fears, while raising concerns about the migrants registering with GPs in the county, some already struggling to book appointments.
Well, I think this just symbolises what's going on all over the country, although this has caught a lot of attention because it's a sort of an area that people are describing as very leafy. But, you know, all over the country, people who are finding that there are asylum seekers being accommodated very near them or very near their child's school or in particular neighbourhoods are very nervous. And that is not racism, it's entirely legitimate and logical concern based on the behaviour of a minority of asylum seekers who have been known to commit the most terrible crimes. Now, of course, British people also commit terrible crimes, but British people are not concentrated in these types of settings with nobody knowing exactly who they are.
Yeah. I wonder if I could ask you, just before you go, about this story about Maxie Allen. We're going to speak to him a little bit later on in the programme. This is a person who I know because I worked with him, but he was complaining about his daughter's school, and then suddenly police were on his doorstep. He and his partner have now got a £20,000 payout. I remember the story at the time. It was just absolutely outrageous that simply through writing letters and emails to the school to complain about education, that the police came round. We can see some of the footage on the screen now of the 6 officers who came round, knocked the door, arrested Maxie and his partner Rosalind in front of their children, took them away and held them for over 10 hours. I think a lot of people really worry about this because the police seem to not pick up many of the criminals they should be picking up, and actually picking on people like Maxie who they should be nowhere near.
I mean, what an absolute nonsense. I mean, completely ridiculous to send multiple officers round to the household of someone who was accused of nothing whatsoever that was any kind of safety risk to anybody. I'm afraid this isn't an isolated case. I actually wrote for the Telegraph about a similar case of a father who found himself subject to the same sort of treatment from the police after he sent multiple complaining emails to the school. Now, in the case of this particular father, he'd be the first to say that he's no angel. He's had the odd brush with the law before, but in no way, shape or form did he constitute, a massive threat to the school or to society at that point, because he was writing some slightly grumpy emails to the school. I mean, this is all ridiculous. This reflex of, well, we're going to report it to the police. And I think some of this is actually, the political class is to blame. For years, politicians have used reporting things to the police as a weapon against political opponents, stuff that really the police should have no locus in altogether. And it sets a terrible example to everyone else.
Yeah, and I think the spiciest thing that Rosalind, Maxie's partner, wrote was that she called a teacher a control freak. I mean, that is not an arrestable offence. Isabel, thank you. Appreciate you joining us today. That's Isabel Oakeshott, Talks International editor. Mo in Leicester says, this idea sounds like Starmer has given up on smashing the gangs. Does that mean we can stop paying the French for doing nothing? Very good point, Mo. Sally says, hi Peter, Mahmoud states that only 100,000 of the 400,000 asylum seekers are funded at taxpayers' expense. The figure must include virtually all claimants, surely not just that 100,000. Margaret in Birmingham, the speech by Shabana Mahmood will be all about how we must be more compassionate to these young men crossing the channel, coming from war-torn countries. No, she has to stop the boats. Simple, problem sorted. Jenny in Bicester says the Speaker calls it the hokey cookie budget. Now we've had the hokey cookie one in, one out policy, and we are likely now to see the hokey cookie asylum policy. Won't she get it through? So Starmer's government is now the hokey cookie government officially, says Jenny. Jane, that's what it's all about, Jenny. Jane says, unfortunately, the Home Secretary is wasting parliamentary time today. This will be forgotten next week because of the budget. Then it will be recess, and the public just don't believe anything that anybody in SW1 says. And Leslie says 20 years for a decision on citizenship for migrants is no deterrent. If they arrive illegally, they shouldn't have citizenship ever, says Leslie. Well, that's certainly the policy of the Conservatives and Reform UK. We'll talk more about that with Robert Bates from the Centre for Migration Control. We'll get his views on it. And as I say, Maxie Allen's coming soon. The father has a disabled child. The child is dealing with all sorts of learning issues, who he complained to the school, wrote a few emails, put a few things on social media complaining about the school. Next thing, 6 coppers on his doorstep. Finally, they've apologised and have given him and his partner some compensation. We'll talk to him very soon. Stay with us and get your call in as well. 0344 499 1000. Let me know what you think about all the issues we're talking about today on Talk Drive.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks to Amanda, who has says, does Shabana Mahmood think we're born yesterday? Any fool knows the only real deterrent is detain and deport. Lots of opinions coming into the building. Get your call in, 0344 499 1000. I'll take as many calls as I can between now and 7 o'clock. But I want to speak to Robert Bates now from the Centre for Migration Control. He's their research director. Hi, Robert.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming into the studio. Tell me about the stuff they're not telling us about in this. You've been going through the whole document, 32 pages, and there's issues here about safe and legal routes, and I want to get into that a little bit. Tell us what you've been reading, what you think about this, what you think they're going to do, especially in regard to human rights legislation, because you can say we're going to take jewellery off asylum seekers as much as you want, but what is the stuff they're not trumpeting?
So they didn't really talk about safe and legal routes at all over the weekend. They were trailing all the sort of red meat, the heavy-handed stuff that would make people think, actually, this is a government that means business. But the document that has been out about an hour now is very clear that a large part of this plan will entail creating these safe and legal routes in cooperation with international organisations like the UNHCR, in cooperation with left-wing charities in the UK and activist groups and immigration lawyers, to create what is effectively an open-ended route for individuals who are perhaps coming from countries that aren't really compatible with Britain and don't really actually have that.
Are we being hoodwinked here? Is that what's happening, do you think?
I genuinely can't think of a more sort of egregious press sort of rolling of the pitch that then is so disconnected from what has actually been published in a document. I think every sort of attention-grabbing headline, whether it be, you know, refugees will have to wait 20 years for settled status, whether it be, or we're going to seize their assets, or we're going to kick them out of hotels, every single one of these falls down when you actually look at what they're proposing. So let's take, for instance, the fact that they're going to remove certain provisions that require the government to look after individuals and provide them with accommodation, provide them with financial services. What they're doing is effectively removing one component of the legal framework, an EU law, or a law we had to implement because we were EU members. But in reality, actually, the existing obligations that councils have, local authorities have, and the central government has, means that they will still end up with a legal duty to ensure these individuals are put in accommodation. So whilst it might not be hotels, because the government's clearly trying to move away from hotels, it'll be those kind of military bases that we're seeing down in Crowborough, where there was huge public
2,000 people protesting yesterday.
And quite rightly so, because, you know, the prospect of 600 unvetted individuals being dumped effectively in the middle of nowhere, just given free rein to roam around the streets.
And none of this is retrospective either. It's just when it goes through. So the people who are in this country already who haven't been processed, what is it, 76% of them generally, of asylum seekers generally given asylum at the end of it?
Once you account for the sort of tribunal processes, then that is really where we end up. And again, this plan doesn't actually do anything to combat that going forward. So you're absolutely right. Those that are already here are effectively operating on the previous asylum rules, and they won't really be implicated by these. And what we're looking at here is really, you know, the hundreds of thousands that we could probably expect over the next few years to be coming across in the channel anyway. And these are the kind of this is the kind of template in which we will be processing them. And really, actually, what we are seeing is a liberalisation of some components of it. So, for instance, they're talking about reformatting the way immigration tribunals work and individuals only getting one asylum appeal. But when you actually think about what that means, you know that sort of immigration judges will be far more likely, therefore, to grant appeals to individuals.
Because you only have one appeal, it's the only chance.
And if there's an inkling of a doubt, you know that the immigration tribunal judge will be saying, well, actually, I can't really with certainty say that this appeal is not valid, and therefore I'm going to give you...
So it could actually make it easier for people to come to this country.
I think we'll definitely see an increase of those cases that have been rejected by the Home Office actually being overturned.
Tell us about these safe and legal routes. How many of them exist at the moment? Because we've had some from Hong Kong, we've had some from Ukraine, Ukraine. How many of them are we as we speak today?
So we have basically three with three different countries. We have the Hong Kong, although that's sort of winding down a bit. We obviously had the Ukrainian schemes. There were 2 schemes in there, and then we had 2 Afghan schemes as well. And these provide sort of case studies as to what we can really expect in terms of the economic contribution of individuals that will be coming in the proposed safe and legal route. So let's take the Afghan one, for instance. We know that just 1 in 10 individuals that have arrived under that route are actually in employment. So this is a situation where actually you realise that a lot of these individuals, they aren't the doctors and engineers that perhaps the Green Party really, really wish that they were. They are in fact sort of individuals that aren't really going to be able to partake in economic life. I think we'll see a lot of them struggling to even integrate socially and into the communities that they're housed in. I think when you look at the Ukraine one, that has probably been more of a success, and we saw, of course, many British people open up their homes and really, really get on board with that because they recognise that it was a legitimate case of individuals having to flee turmoil. But I think the government are going to lose public support very quickly when we start to realise that we're having to create safe and legal routes left, right and centre effectively.
How many could there be? How many are we talking about here? Because we have 3 already. I don't think it would be too many people who would be annoyed about Ukraine. Hong Kong, I can see the point of that. Afghan, we certainly have a duty to some of those people who helped us during the Afghan wars, but as you say, only 1 in 10 of those people actually in employment. I think there'll be some people who say no, none, there shouldn't be any whatsoever. But if you're expanding that, what will the pressure be from the UNHCR? What will the pressure be from these left-wing charities saying where they want people to come from? Because if you're expanding those safe and legal routes, the government can say illegal immigration is down, but you still have an increase of people in the country, of migrants in the country who might be coming through one of these routes for asylum.
Well, exactly, and I think that's where the government have misunderstood where the public sentiment is. It's not just the premise of individuals coming into the country illegally, it is just the sheer scale. The government have said that they are going to leave this open to a consultation, and as someone that's worked in government, you're well aware that actually these consultations effectively end up being hijacked by charities and well-organised organisations that are able to just assert their own point of view.
It's not someone sending an email, it's people who have professional lobbyists who are in their organisations, people, government relationship managers, people like that, who will come up with big presentations, 20-page, 20-slide presentations. They'll go in, they'll talk about this, and they'll say there has to be a safe and legal route from this country. So actually, I mean, I think we've been sold a pup here. I think there's a lot in this that they're not telling us. They're selling what they see as the tough things. A lot of them don't think it's going to happen. I mean, I honestly would question if someone arrives in a small boat saying, hold on, give me your jewellery. I mean, I would seriously question that will ever happen in this country.
Well, we know from Denmark it barely does happen. I think the fact that they've lent into that so much because it seems sort of tough and it seems...
Look at us, we're tough.
Exactly, and they've kind of gone with that, knowing that it probably is actually the only element of the scheme that would really, once you delve into the details, appeal to certain individuals that want to see a bit more restriction. And actually many of these individuals don't turn up with many valuables anyway, so the idea that we're going to be reimbursed from seizing sort of trinkets and things like that was always a bit far-fetched. But I think the fact that that was such a big part of the conversation over the weekend really conveys to me that this was a government that knew actually what they were doing was going to be unpopular with the public at large, and therefore they thought they had to kind of lace it preemptively in this kind of terminology. And I think a lot of journalists are probably having written pieces about what was sort of being proposed and being mulled over.
Well, they trickled it out. I spoke to Mike Tapp, the immigration minister, yesterday, and said, a lot of this detail is to be set out tomorrow in Parliament. That's fine, and that's where it should happen. But if you're going to do what they call in government a trail, if you're going to put some of it in the Sunday papers, what they did, and they did this very cynically, I think, is put out as you put it, the kind of red meat stuff that people will say, OK, you're taking a tough approach. But then when you look into the detail of it, as you have, Robert, there's a lot here that I think is actually as liberal as we might expect.
Yeah, more liberal, actually. Honestly, the fact that they've not been prepared thus far to put a cap on these safe and legal routes is absolutely terrifying. And again, talking about consultations, that again is up to a consultation. So this is really something that could just spiral out of even the Home Secretary's control down in the future. I think really that they were stuck between a rock and a hard place in that, of course, you've got a public wanting one thing and you've got Labour backbenchers that want another. And I wonder, whilst this sort of harsh rhetoric, this strong rhetoric was going on in the media, whether actually Labour MPs and backbenchers were being briefed behind the scenes saying,
actually,
don't worry,
it's not that bad.
Yeah, don't calm down.
So overall, I know you haven't looked at every single aspect of this, it only came out out an hour or so ago, so we wouldn't expect you to know chapter and verse in this. But what is your instinct at 4:30 on Monday afternoon? Is this actually a tough plan, or is this a weak plan, and are we being sold it as a tough plan? What is your instinct?
I believe when it comes to issues of numbers, when it comes to issues of cost, when it comes to issues of community cohesion and the safety of the public, this is going, if anything, to make the situation worse. I really can't see how this is going to be a silver bullet that the government wished people would perceive it to be. I think actually what this really is just opening up a lot of problems for the future and kicking actually the can down the road on a lot of really fundamental issues that, if we don't keep our eye on the ball with some of these things, could really come to hurt us in the long term.
Robert, appreciate your instant analysis of that government document. You can of course get it on the Home Office website if you want to have a look yourself. Jane says the easy solution is put new arrivals in areas where the MPs want them to come. A safe country must be found for UK citizens to go. Many are frightened to leave their homes at the moment. And Leslie says deporting migrants who have been here for 20 years, it will never happen. Lots more to discuss on this. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk in just a second to the father who reported the local school, who was complaining to them, making clear that he was unhappy with what they said. What happened next? 6 coppers on his doorstep. He'll be live in the studio in just a few minutes' time. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch about all the issues to do with immigration. Robert says when Labour make big announcements, it means they're distracting you from something else, probably the budget. In this case, it will be a case of big words and little content. And Terry and Slough says how this country could do with Mrs Thatcher. She would soon put a stop to these small boats invading our country. Unfortunately, in my opinion, we've got a spineless, gutless Labour government that seems to care more about the welfare of asylum seekers and illegal immigrants than they do about the British people. Well, we'll hear from the Home Secretary a little bit later on. Shabana Mahmood will be up in Parliament. But one story I want to talk about now is Maxie Allen's story. Police have paid him and his partner £20,000, and well they might, because after they unlawfully arrested them, after they made complaints about their daughter's primary school, including on a WhatsApp group chat. This was really straightforward. Parents saying, actually there's some problems with the school, we need to sort a few things out. They sent a few emails in, they put up social media posts, and guess what? 6 police officers on their doorstep. Maxie Allen is with me now. He's a Times Radio producer, our sister station, Times Radio. Maxie, I'm delighted this has come to an end. I know it's been an absolute nightmare for you and your family and your children especially. Can you just take us back to the day you were arrested and just chat us through this?
Yeah, 29th of January, it was just before midday. My partner Rosalind and I were at home. I was in our side room on a Zoom call. And the first I knew that something strange was happening is on the little bit of the Zoom screen where you see yourself, I saw 2 figures standing behind me in high-vis jackets. They were police officers. I hadn't heard them come in, and a few moments later they arrested me. In our sitting room, 2 other officers were arresting my partner, Rosalind, in front of our 3-year-old daughter, and then another 2 officers began searching our house. So in total 6 police officers in 3 cars. And we were arrested on suspicion of harassment, malicious communications, and causing a nuisance on school property. Now, none of the 6 officers who came to our house that day, and our house was full of police for that period of time, none of them had been involved in it, so they couldn't answer any questions. They didn't know. But they took us off to custody separately. They had to summon my 80-year-old mother-in-law, who this came as a bit of a shock to her.
Of course.
To bring around the house to look after our 3-year-old and then our other daughter later in the day. So our children were deprived of their parents for a day. But we were taken to custody, and separately the full Monty, really: DNA swab, fingerprints, shoe prints, mugshot, and put into cells. And then about 8 hours later, 9 hours later, we were interviewed by 2 detectives who also had no previous involvement with the case. It had just been handed to them. And I was expecting a sort of forensic examination, but they didn't really appear to have any evidence. And they didn't know either really why we'd been arrested. They had a vague statement from the complainant. It started, as you say, with some queries and discussion about our daughter's primary school, which is a state primary school. So it's a publicly funded organisation. I had been a governor of the school. I'd been a parent governor for 4 years and worked closely with the person who ended up reporting us to the police about 5 times. There was a change of head teacher. They weren't appointing a new one. They appointed an interim kind of forever, or so it seemed. And at the time, it seemed to me like something wasn't quite right. I had been a governor. I'd done all the training. I began making some queries. They didn't like it. They didn't answer the question. We discussed it on a WhatsApp group, which was a private group. It wasn't to do with the school. It was private correspondence. Somehow some of these messages emerged to somebody senior at the school who I don't think liked it very much, and that was the first time they called the police. They then banned us from the school, so we couldn't have any normal conversations, we couldn't go to any school events, couldn't speak to a teacher.
And your daughter was still at the school at that time?
She was still at the school, and what made it more complicated was that our daughter Sasha has some extra needs. She's on the SEND register, she has epilepsy, which is a disability, takes medication, and that made things more complicated. Doesn't give us extra rights, but it means that everything was more complicated. The ban was really complicated, so we pushed back hard. We pushed back really hard.
Because there will be people, I'm sure, listening to this thinking, how bad was this guy? You know, what was he saying? What was he writing in those emails? What's the worst thing you wrote in the emails or the public posts or the WhatsApp group?
Well, there's not a single thing that I wouldn't read out on this programme. Our emails were about our daughter, sorting out all the problems with her education and her health and her welfare when we couldn't see any teachers or ever go onto the school site, and about the complaints process because we tried to overturn the ban. We never complained to the school, actually, until after we were banned, and we complained about being banned. In the WhatsApp messages, which were private, I mean, none of this has ever been disclosed. They've never put any of it forward. When we first discussed this story at the end of March, we went back through what we could find, and the strongest comment we could find anywhere was my partner referring to this senior school leader as a control freak.
I mean, that's not exactly a horrible thing to say. It's not a nice thing to say necessarily, but maybe that was your strongly held opinion at the time, and that was a reasonable thing to express.
Well, it was a private conversation.
And a private conversation. And what worries me about all of this is I know you. We've worked together. You know, you're a good bloke. You weren't doing anything other than standing up for your child. And then, because of reasonably expressed opinions, I would argue, and I'm sure you would too, 6 police officers arrive in your door. I mean, people will be really scared about that.
Yeah, I mean...
It cannot have been in any way a pleasant experience.
Well, no, I mean, it didn't really sink in till a bit later. I mean, at first it was just disbelief. It was like being in a film. I could literally not believe it was happening. And even in the cell, I had not been in a police cell before, it still felt unreal, and it wasn't till a few days later that it started to kind of, sink in. I must stress that our experience is not the worst that people will have at the hands of the police. It really isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of stuff much more serious occurs than happened to us. And so it was really more of a point of us pushing back on it all, was kind of a point of principle. I mean, it was upsetting for our children, for my mother-in-law, for our neighbours. One of them was reduced to tears by the sight of these 3 police cars, and there's all of that. The thing about contacting any public authority to stand up for yourself, harassment in law is quite specific. There must be intent to cause fear and distress. Now, those are 2 important words, fear and distress. That's quite a high bar. That's got to be your intention to do that, and possibly, arguably causing an inconvenience. And I don't think we did, but even if we had, that is not causing fear and distress. So I think all in all, you can see why we wanted to kind of get a resolution.
Of course. So what happened next, and what's happened now?
Well, going back to the original event, so we were held in custody for altogether around about 12 hours. Then we were sent home. A few weeks later, I mean, it took a few weeks for them to work through it. We got a call from the detective who hadn't made the decision to say, his words, "I find no evidence of these offences." He gave us what's called no further action, so that was the end of it. I thought, well, this is kind of a story you've got to tell. So we told it, and I was we were very lucky. We were very fortunate. We had the means to tell our story, which many people do not. But then, at the time, the Chief Constable spoke about it publicly, and he wasn't having any of it. And he defended their handling. He defended the lawfulness of the arrest, and he said this decision to arrest, he said, was signed off at inspector level. But Rosalind thought, well, that's not right. So luckily, because we'd been talking about it publicly, the Free Speech Union, to whom I'm very grateful, offered to fund a legal action, and that process took place over quite a long time. And what I can make out is, in the cold light of day, the lawyers for the constabulary realised that original position was not sustainable, and their finding is, what they've conceded to us, is they had no evidence for necessity. No evidence for necessity, which I take to mean they didn't have any evidence at all.
Yeah. What do you think this says about where we are as a country, where someone who is a law-abiding citizen, someone public-spirited enough to be a school governor, who is trying to fight for his kid to make sure that she gets the right education, has 6 police officers on his door, is held for 12 hours, is asked all these questions by police officers who don't know what they're doing? I mean, it's really worrying, actually. There's so many people, I got people every single day on this show saying, the police don't turn up if you're burgled. The police don't turn up if there's, retailers, shoplifting. There's so many things we'd love the police to do. Instead, they're harassing people like you and your partner. What do you think that says about where we are as a country?
It's a very good question, and I don't think there's a one simple answer to it. I mean, no one's above the law, and of course I regard myself as having been law-abiding, but no backstory prevents you from this. I think there's several elements to it. In our particular case, there are still some unanswered questions about exactly what happened in the conversation between complainant and decision by an inspector. On a broader level, I think, it is partly the police's interpretation, and they are under a lot of pressures with very old-fashioned legislation. It should be noted that Hertfordshire Constabulary have performed some very high-quality operations. They apprehended the culprit of the Bushy crossbow attacks, for example. They apprehended, there was an example of an unexploded bomb a few streets from us, which is a very successful policing operation. They've got a lot of things right, Hertfordshire Constabulary. That's important. But I think on a wider societal level, it's easy to blame the police. But I wonder whether it's a bit of Amazon culture. We're used to pressing a button. We want something, we press a button. We want a takeaway, we press a button, and we get Uber Eats. People want a problem solved, they call the police.
Jonathan Ash-Edwards, who's the Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire, has said there's clearly been a fundamental breakdown in relationships between a school and parents, and this shouldn't have become a police matter. What is happening with your daughter now? She's no longer at the school, she's older now.
Well, we'd taken her out of the school 5 days before we were arrested, which is a slightly strange part of the story, because in our mind it was, we thought, okay, we'll give up here, we'll walk away. And then 5 days later the police came. So on the day we were arrested, it was actually her third day, only her third day at her new school. So it was already a bit of an unsettling time for her. Of course, and then no parents there for the rest of the day without explanation. But at her new school, and her little sister is at the companion infant school, everything is fine. Everything is normal, everything is fine. She's happy, both our girls are happy, and it's all good. Well,
Maxie, I know you got a few quid in compensation as this. I think you deserve every single penny. I think this is an absolutely awful thing that happened to Maxie and his family, and the problem is that it keeps happening. There are things like this, as you've said, that keep happening, that people get arrested and charged, and I know you weren't charged, but certainly held for long periods of time for absolutely no reason. Jamie's been in touch and says the police need to be out catching real criminals. This is ridiculous. Jamie, I agree with every word. Maxie, thank you for coming into the studio. That's Maxie Allen, who's a Times Radio producer and someone who just had a dreadful experience with Hertfordshire Police there, and if you've some thoughts or comments on this, do get in touch. Let me know your thoughts. Where are we with free speech? Where are we with simply complaining about your child's school, for goodness sake? 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
In terms of your question around taxes, there are no additional tax rises needed beyond the ones that I've set out.
Don't need to increase taxes. I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes.
I will not increase your national insurance. I will not increase your VAT, and I will not increase your income tax.
We don't need to come back for more. We've done that now. We've wiped the slate clean.
The economic circumstances have declined, deteriorated since a year ago. We are having to look at taxes and spending.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, Donald Trump's still not happy with the BBC after they doctored a clip of him changing the meaning of what he said on the 6th of January 2021. He says he's going to take legal action against the broadcaster. They apologised on Friday night. The BBC chairman, Sir Shamir Shah, said there was no basis for a defamation case and we're determined to fight this. This is after the president said he would sue the corporation from between $1 and $5 billion. In an email to staff, Sir Shamir Shah said there has been a lot being written, said and speculated upon the possibility of legal action, including potential costs. In this we are, of course, acutely aware of the privilege of our funding and we need to protect our licence fee payers, the British public. Well, my question with all of that is, if you went to the NHS and something dreadful happened to you and there was medical negligence, should you not sue them because it's public money? That's nonsense. Should Maxie Allen not get compensation because the police are a public organisation? That doesn't make sense to me. Let's just remind ourselves of what Donald Trump said about the BBC.
what BBC did, nobody would even think a thing like that was done. They actually changed the words coming out of my mouth. Well, we'll sue them. We'll sue them for anywhere between $1 billion and $5 billion, probably sometime next week.
So you're ready to take?
Well, I think I have to do it. I mean, they've even admitted that they cheated. I mean, not that they couldn't have not done that. They cheated. They changed the words coming out of my mouth. The people of the UK are very angry about what happened, as you can imagine, because it shows the BBC is fake news. Plus, you and I knew that for a long time, but we didn't know it was this fake.
Have you raised the issue with Sir Keir Starmer?
I have not, but I'll call him. I'm going to call him over the weekend. He actually put a call into me. He's very embarrassed by it.
So the difference between what we here at Talk do and what the BBC did was that if you're watching that on the screen, you'll see that there are a couple of white flashes in the middle of that. That's to denote that Donald Trump was speaking for a long time. We've picked out about 40 seconds of it, and there are a couple of editing bits in the middle of it just to put it all together. That's really straightforward. That's what broadcasters should do. The BBC did not. They changed the meaning of what Donald Trump said. Let's speak to Rick Gates now, who is Trump's former campaign chairman. Rick, have you spoken to the president about this? What does he think about it?
No, I haven't spoken to him directly about it, but several aides around him, and he's absolutely furious about it, as he should be. This is something that has happened in multiple countries. Obviously, the U.S. We had a number of issues where the president sued successfully to hold these journalists and these news organizations accountable, and that's exactly what he's going to do with the BBC. It's always been viewed to a large extent as a gold standard in terms of reporting reliable, accurate information, and this is just an absolute atrocious activity that they've done. I give them credit. They actually apologized before the lawsuit came. Most of the organizations in the U.S. didn't apologize until after President Trump won their lawsuits, so the BBC is a little ahead of the game. But it's not going to stop the president from moving forward with action. It's not about the money. He doesn't care. What he cares about is the principle of free and fair news, making sure that it's accurate and transparent.
So if he doesn't care about the money and they have apologized, why continue to sue, do you think?
To hold them accountable. Absolutely. We're seeing this across the world, not just with President Trump, but also you're seeing just the news establishments are putting their own editorial content, their own interpretations, and their own opinions. And if you want to be a pundit, that's great, go be a pundit. But when you're reporting news information to citizenry, then it's got to be accurate, it's got to be absolutely transparent. This is about accountability. This is making sure that these news organizations don't do it again. Look at the effect that he's had in the United States. He beat CBS, he beat Disney and ABC. And what does that have? What has that done? That's had a kind of chain reaction into news organizations now thinking twice about maybe something that they'll put out, or they don't move forward with a potentially salacious headline without more thoroughly vetting it. That means that there's more accuracy. That means that there's more accountability in these news organizations. I think that's exactly what he's gunning for. I think that's good news for anybody that's listening to these kind of publications.
We pay the license fee in a different way to America. Everybody has to pay about £175 if they have a device that has television that has live broadcasting on it. Does President Trump mind that it's public money necessarily? I don't think that should necessarily be an issue, but is that something that's come up in these conversations, that it's the British public's money? It's a collective organisation, essentially. Does he mind about that? Has that entered his thinking, do you think?
No, not at all. And if you look at what he's done with some of the money here in the U.S., he's actually given it back to charitable causes. So, in fact, if Donald Trump were to win a lawsuit in the U.K., the people would probably benefit more from that than they are from what the BBC is doing in terms of using that money for, unfortunate purposes. So it has nothing to do with whether it's private or public money. Again, it's about the accountability. So I think he is going to move forward with it pretty aggressively. Don't know how the UK courts may interpret it. Maybe they have a different interpretation than we in the US. But if you look at the president's track record here in the US, and I think that is a large basis for why he would move forward with the BBC in the UK, is he's been extremely successful in all of these lawsuits in the United States.
Just give us the latest, Rick, on what's happening with the Epstein files as well, because that's something that Donald Trump has been talking about in the last couple of days.
Yeah, absolutely. Last night, the president on his trip back from Mar-a-Lago indicated that he is encouraging Republicans to vote on a bill that will be coming this week, likely tomorrow, to have the DOJ, Department of Justice, release all of those Epstein files. So it is a turn from where the president was a few weeks ago, but I think it's the right solution to get this issue past us. It's clearly that he's done nothing wrong. The Democrats know it, the Republicans know it. So I think as we move forward, the key is getting that transparency out there. And he's been by far one of the most transparent presidents we've ever had, and that's what he wants to do. So we will see what happens with the bill this week, but I think you're going to see a positive reception. I think you're going to see a positive vote, and those files ultimately will be released.
Rick, thank you. That's Rick Gates there, Trump's former campaign chairman. Appreciate him joining us on the programme. What do you think about all of this? 0344 499 1000. Should Donald Trump continue to sue the BBC? Do you mind that it's your money that could go to the president, or indeed charitable causes? What do you think? 0344 499 1000. Gary's been in touch and says, I have a friend who's a retired senior officer in the Met Police, and he told me that the reason a disproportionate number of officers turn up to incidents like this is because they want to progress through the ranks. Police officers have to give examples of how they've dealt with certain types of complaint, and online abuse and harassment is one of them. That's why at the slightest opportunity, every available officer drops what they're doing to deal with such a complaint, so that they can all put a tick in the box alongside that one on their CV. That's really interesting, Gary. Thank you. Leslie says, has any police officer actually been held to account for the rest of that couple? Well, I hope they are. Certainly, if it was signed off at inspector level, I would certainly question whether who the inspector was, why on earth that was signed off, and why on earth 6 officers arrived at Maxi Allen's doorstep. Sai says, if Starmer cannot get his policies past the rump of his own party, and it seems he can't, then he needs to seriously ask himself if he can continue to credibly govern the country. I think that's a really, really good point. I have a list here in front of me, actually, of about 20 figures in the Labour Party who are really, really unhappy with this migration plan. I found it fascinating what Robert Bates was saying a little bit early on all of this, that actually one of the details that's come out, the Daily Mail has found out, and Robert was hinting towards it, current incentives of up to £3,000 to incentivise migrants to go home could be increased further, and families could get even bigger packages, so they could get more taxpayers' money to say, you've come here illegally, go home. By the way, here's some money for you in order to do that. It is just absolutely disgusting that our money could be used for that. Robin Lincoln says, with all this mass immigration and the constant debate about where everyone should be housed, it makes me wonder, why don't the people who are strongly pro-immigration offer to host them in their own homes, the way many did with those fleeing Ukraine? I'm pretty certain very few would actually do that, says Rob. Mike says, evening Peter, I think your wrongly arrested guest Maxi is being too reasonable over what happened. There's an underlying control issue, policies to keep the public in check and to muzzle free speech. Mike, I totally agree with you. In fact, I was chatting to a colleague here about that. I think Maxi is being too reasonable. I think he's very calm and very generous actually to Hertfordshire Police, who really, really destroyed his home idyll, his peace and quiet in his own home, simply because he was complaining to a school about his child's education. I do think that is outrageous. Davy, who says he's an ex-Royal Irish Regiment, says, I understand about being locked up by the police. I was arrested twice and locked in a custody cell in Birkenhead for a total of approximately 20 hours. It didn't bother me. I was ex-military. I'd been locked up many times in the guard room. When the police are concerned, they lock people up to intimidate them. Typical sick coppers, says Davy. Lots more to discuss after the news. Stay with us here on Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good evening. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Monday evening. Lots to talk about, including Shabana Mahmood's plan for asylum. Is it a crackdown, or actually is it a bit of a sop, because those safe and legal routes could actually be open? There could be more of them now, and we could see asylum seekers being given more money, or would-be migrants who are here illegally, more money to go home. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that this hour, and the Home Secretary is due to speak in the House of Commons. We'll take what she says and her opposite number, Chris Philp, who I spoke to yesterday on my Sunday programme. I'm usually here on Sundays between 10 and 1. Lots to talk about with that. We'll talk about a Talk exclusive as well. These are rape gang families who have been infiltrating charities to threaten survivors. It is absolutely dreadful. We've got a whistleblower, Paul O'Rourke, who's coming up a little bit later on. There's a Talk exclusive. We'll speak to him about attempts that were made by people to get into, to infiltrate these support organisations, to intimidate victims and actually to try to get people back into rape gangs. It is absolutely disgusting. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. We'll also speak to the Shadow Home Office Minister, Matt Vickers. And polling is interesting because we've got now a proposal anyway that school children aged 16 and 17 could be allowed to vote. They could be allowed to vote over a certain number of days actually in schools as well. So we'll be speaking to a schoolgirl and a pollster about that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call to get your voice on the air. I can see people who want to get in on Trump, on Shabana Mahmood, on the BBC. We'll do as much as we can and take as many calls as we can between now and 7 o'clock. Also, there are lots of people getting in touch on Twitter at Peter Cardwell, or send me a message on at talkTV as well. You can text me at 7222 with the word talk in your text. You can send me a WhatsApp voice note less than a minute. Please, 0344 499 1000. You can send me a WhatsApp text message or give me a ring on that number as well. So much to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. Stay with us here on Talk. Amy's been in touch and says, with Shabana Mahmood announcing this new policy on asylum, does that mean the government has decided that its one in, one out scheme isn't working? And is this solely Shabana's idea? Because if it's a government idea, then why didn't Yvette Cooper come up with something like this? I think there's a legitimate question, Amy, to be asked. What was Yvette Cooper doing at the Home Office? If this is this strong new policy, Shabana Mahmood's been there for 72 days and she's come up with it, but actually, as well, is it that strong? We'll get into all of that in a second. Sandy says, Peter, the human rights lawyers are already threatening Mahmood, and every lefty MP and commentator is screaming about how cruel her plan is. It won't see the light of day, says Sandy on Twitter. It'll be committed to the annals of more Labour failure like Smash the Gangs and one in, one out, shake it all about. Ray says, on our guest we had a little bit earlier on, he was complaining about his daughter's school. 6 police officers came to his door. Ray says, as ever, the process is the punishment when the police have little or no evidence. Everyone in a similar situation must sue until the police are brought back to a better place. Rafi says, Britain is losing friends. They have very few. And another person says, what were the results of your DNA? What % of you is Angel? That's very kind. We did that yesterday. Go on talk.tv, our website after this programme, or YouTube, and have a look at the show yesterday. It was about the last half an hour of the show. I did my DNA test. It was very, very interesting. So the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, will set out the new immigration crackdown later this evening. We should get that within the hour. Of course, these things are subject to change of parliamentary timings. But let's have a look at what she posted on her social media earlier today, just to explain these apparently tough new proposals on immigration. Some of them perhaps not that tough. We'll talk about that too. This is what the Home Secretary, Shabana Mahmood, said.
On Monday, I will announce the most significant changes to our asylum system in modern times. Today, I want to tell you why. Across Europe, asylum claims are falling, but in Britain, they are rising. In the last 4 years, 400,000 people claimed asylum here. Over 100,000 are housed and supported at taxpayers' expense.
Well, let's hear from Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader. There's a lot of talk about a huge rebellion from Labour MPs, but the Conservatives have actually offered their support. This is what the Leader of the Opposition, Leader of the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, has said today.
What we're seeing from the Labour government is steps in the right direction, so we want to encourage them in that right direction. Of course, we have a fully comprehensive borders plan. Some of what we've seen Labour announce is similar, but not as much as what we've done. We can see that the Labour backbenchers don't like this, so I have offered that we will support the government in going in the right direction.
Steps in the right direction. That's not usually what Kemi Badenoch says. There could be a very, very interesting state of affairs. We'll talk about this with James Mathewson in just a second, where the Tories helped us get over the line. It'll be interesting to see how many Labour rebels there may be. Richard Tice, the Deputy Leader of Reform UK, has been talking about this as well. This is his view. He was at a press conference earlier today.
The reality is, however well-intentioned the Home Secretary is, A, she hasn't got the support and confidence of her own party, but B, while still being a member of the European Convention on Human Rights and still having the Human Rights Act in its current form, she just won't be able to deliver what she's talking about. I do think it's slightly ironic. If we had said 2 months ago in our party conference what she said over the weekend, we'd been caused all sorts of nasty, beastly names.
I think he's got a point, actually. Interesting that Linda on Twitter says 20 years, no, detain and deport immediately. This is no better than the ridiculous one in, one out. Ollie says it just means they'll still be allowed to stay for 20 years and taxpayers will have to pay to support them in the meantime. And Steve says the Conservatives waved through tens of thousands. James says any illegal immigrant will say thank you, I'll take that, because as soon as I step foot in the UK I have a 99% chance of staying, thanks to human rights lawyers, legal aid, ECHR and Labour Lib Dems. Thank you, I'm on my way. Well, there's lots to discuss with James Mathewson, the former Labour spokesman. James, I just wonder what you make of these plans straightforwardly, and then we'll get into the kind of Labour dynamics in a second, because interestingly we were talking to Robert Bates from the Centre for Migration Control a bit earlier on, and he said actually the red meat stuff, the tough stuff, talking about taking jewellery off immigrants who come over in small boats, well actually there's a lot in this that is about actually opening up more safe and legal routes, and talking about current incentives of £3,000 to go home actually being increased further. So there's lots of this that they're not perhaps putting forward in as straightforward a way as they could.
Yeah, I mean, my take on it's fairly simple, Peter, and as most of your viewers won't be surprised to hear, they won't like my take on it, but it's that this is completely ridiculous, it's completely pointless, for the very reason that you aren't happy with it, and that many of your viewers don't seem happy with it. That's the litmus test for me, because the very reason that she's doing this, and the very reason Keir Starmer's government want to do this, is to try and win back those people who previously were Labour, who have gone towards reform, many of whom are your viewers from the views that they express, and those people who want to see illegal immigration, so-called illegal immigration, curbed and dealt with as their number one priority. That's who this is for. But they're not happy with it. So what is the point? That's what I don't understand politically about. If they're not going to be happy with it, why are we aping Nigel Farage? Why are we aping the...
They're not aping him per se, because he says he would withdraw from the European Convention on Human Rights. He says that no one who comes to the shore illegally would ever receive asylum. So actually, it's not as far as Farage or even the Conservatives, actually.
No, so exactly. So why would you support Labour when you could support that instead? If you're bothered about it.
Do you not think this will convince anybody?
Maybe a few people. A few people who didn't want to vote for Farage or the Tories, but who have concerns about immigration. But honestly, Peter, I'll be totally honest with you. I don't know those people. I don't know where they are. I don't know if they exist. And I know divides are bigger than ever in Britain right now. Every single person in my life is not bothered about illegal immigration, couldn't care less about it.
Really?
That's the circles that I move in, right? Okay. Everybody who you hear about who calls into your show will say the opposite.
Yeah, of course they will. Well, I'd be very interested actually in the point you raised there, James. If there is anybody who's going to change their mind and say, actually, maybe I'll take another look at Labour, maybe Keir Starmer's not that bad, maybe Shabana Mahmood's plan is good. If there's anybody watching or listening who is persuaded by this plan, who thinks that actually, maybe, as Kemi Badenoch does, that thinks this a step in the right direction, give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Let's talk about the people, James, in the party who aren't happy. Tony Vaughan, for example, the MP for Folkestone and Hythe, he says these asylum proposals suggest we have taken the wrong turning. The rhetoric around these reforms encourages the same culture of divisiveness that sees racism and abuse growing in our communities. He's not really a member of the usual suspects. I see John McDonnell, Bell Ribeiro-Addy, Clive Lewis, Nadia Whittam. They're never going to be happy with this. Not in a month of Sundays will they be happy with this. Stella Creasy, the MP for Walthamstow, this is not just performatively cruel, it's economically misjudged. Simon Offer, we should stop the scapegoating of immigrants because it's wrong and cruel. Lord Dubbs, if people have been here for some time, it could be very damaging to them and cruel if they're suddenly asked to leave. They may have settled in the meantime and got married. They may have family here. Do they all have to go back, or are they going to be split up? Which I think is actually a reasonable question to ask. But Keir Starmer already and Shabana Mahmood already have major problems within the Labour Party as a result of this. Could you see a serious rebellion if they try to put this through as it stands?
Not on this. I don't know. I think there's enough Starmer loyalists at the moment. There's people who have... You see, that if you're a new intake Labour MP, right, when you were elected under Starmer's kind of a big majority gain at the last election, then you owe everything to Keir Starmer and to this direction. And you've already...
Well, they haven't felt that loyalty previously on things like welfare, James.
Well, no, but there is a washing process that's taken place. They've gritted their teeth on so many things. To be a Labour MP right now is to be unpopular. That just seems to be the way of things. People on the left aren't happy with you. People on the right certainly aren't happy with you. And for me, looking at this is why it's such a misjudged thing, is because I mean, I would love to see if you get that call, Peter, from anyone, but I just don't see anybody who has already left their support for Labour behind, especially for Keir Starmer. I don't see anybody who really dislikes Keir Starmer being turned around on that question. I don't. They have places to go. Either they're from the left and they go to the Lib Dems or the Greens with Zach Polanski and they're being spoken for there, or they go towards reform. I don't think they go towards the Tories. I mean, seeing the Tories support Labour on this, by the way, is probably more damaging for Starmer than anything, because those accusations of being, completely shifting to the right. If Kemi Badenoch's Tory party is backing your policy, then what the hell are you in power for? And it just plays. But
she knows that as well, though, James. I mean, this is being done. It's not doing it because she thinks Shabana Mahmood's a nice person.
No, of course not. Of course not. And but what it does for the Tories, I don't think they're thinking this through either, because it plays in that narrative of the two big parties, right? The unit party, they're all the same, and they all back each other on the things that matter most to people. And it undermines.
Although Reform UK does seem to be more sympathetic to this than perhaps they would have been otherwise.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
okay.
I think it's playing politics, of course it is, but it does show you that for them to even be able to consider backing it, that the Labour Party has gone in what I would say is completely the wrong direction.
Thank you, James. Really appreciate your contribution. That's James Mathewson, their former Labour spokesman. Let's speak to Mark in Lincolnshire, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi.
Hi there. It's obviously what's going on with Shabana Mahmood. It's always skirting around the edges. I mean, it's basically just doing what the Tories were doing for 14 years. Well,
it's more than that, though, isn't it? If you're going to take jewellery off people arriving on these shores, if you're going to do these more hard-hitting aspects of the policy, that's more than the Conservatives did, is it not?
Oh, come on, Peter. That's really going to happen.
Well, it's not going to happen, but they're saying it'll happen.
Yeah, they're saying it'll happen. Yeah, they say a lot of things. None of which is ever going to really happen, is it? I mean, there's so many different factors. I mean, they're going to have so much opposition from their own backbench. I think anything they do try to put through probably will go through, because the Tories will back them up, because they just love each other anyway, those two. Then you've got the other side of it as well, that people don't really consider, I don't think, very much. Shabana Mahmood herself, at the end of the day, she's going to get a lot of pressure from her own community. That's a factor in this as well, Peter, because the majority, the biggest cohort of asylum seekers in this country are people from Pakistan. She's child of Pakistani immigrants, as far as I'm aware. So there's going to be pressure there from her local community.
And she's changed her mind on this as well. Isabel Oakeshott actually mentioned a clip from 2019 where she was talking about wanting an amnesty for illegal immigrants. I mean, she really has changed her tune. You clearly, well, I think a lot of people out there, maybe you're one of them, Mark, who don't believe her.
I don't. I mean, this is also a Muslim lady, perfectly nice woman by all accounts, quite conservative opinions, as you would expect from any Muslim, really. That, her religion controls everything she does, apparently, her faith.
Do you think that's true? Do you think that's a fair thing to say, Mark?
Well, I think...
I mean, if it controls everything she does, she's had 2 contradictory opinions in the last 6 years. It doesn't control it completely.
Yeah, but there are things within Islam that can allow her to do that, Peter.
Okay.
At the end of the day, it'd be nice to think that she was going to actually do something positive on this. I just don't see it happening.
Yeah.
But one thing I wanted to really mention quickly as well, Peter.
Go for it.
I've not really heard mention of it, and that is the vigil for Rhiannon White over the weekend. It was spoiled. So it was a vigil. This is the young hotel worker, the woman, the mother, that was brutally murdered.
Yes, I remember.
There was a vigil for her over the weekend, literally a vigil, which attracted counter-protesters.
Goodness me. I didn't...
Counter-protesters that were singing, that were chanting things like, "Let them stay." Absolutely disgusting.
I didn't see reporting about that, Mark, but in the break I'm gonna look it up because I missed that story, but thank you for bringing it to my attention. I appreciate that. That's Mark in Lincolnshire there. Amanda in London says everything that's wrong with this country today, beginning with the arrival of the Labour government, that says it all. On the BBC, John says surely if the BBC have apologised, they've admitted responsibility on the Trump aspects of that as well. Lots to discuss. 0344 499 1000. Got a talk exclusive for you coming up on Rape Gang. Stay with us.
This has been going on since Tony Blair opened the floodgates to mass immigration in this century. And as long as we keep calling them asylum seekers, when in fact they're criminally sponsored illegal migrants, we will never solve this problem. If they are asylum seekers, they can claim asylum anywhere in the countries of Europe that they've traveled through in order to get to those tent camps on the border of France. We could actually stop the boats, but we will not do so because the human rights laws forbid it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Time now for a Talk exclusive story. This is about rape gangs' families who have been infiltrating charities to threaten survivors. It's a story I've been really concerned about. Paul O'Rourke is speaking to us exclusively. He is the Managing Director of Next Stage Youth Development. This is an organisation, a very good organisation, that provides support living services for young people aged between 16 and 18 in North West Yorkshire. Paul, thank you for joining us on the programme. I appreciate your time. This is a really, really worrying aspect. Can you just explain what has been happening?
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for having me on. Very good of you. I don't think this is a new challenge. I think it's a challenge that's existed for a long time now, that, you know, social services and charities and care providers like us, we've always looked after vulnerable people. And it's been a place where I think people who are organised in terms of organised crime gangs, or particularly well-organised grooming gangs, they see organisations like ours as a place to continue with their operation and hone in on their grooming activities, really.
So just to be clear, Paul, you have young people who are about to leave care that you're looking after. Just tell us about what you actually do.
So we've got two sides of the organisation. So we would look after young people, particularly from the age of 10, maybe through to 17. And then typical of the way the UK process works, that 16 to 18, young people will go through a transition into something called leaving care.
Yeah.
That's quite a particular thing. I make a point that only last year did that leaving care element of it for 16 plus pass into a new regulatory body. So Ofsted took over for the first time ever last year in terms of regulating all of those places. Previously, they were unregulated.
So you've got quite a number of young people who've been through horrendous and unimaginable challenges in life, and you're looking after them, your organisation looks after them, and they, of course, when they're out and about, when they're coming back from school, when they're doing what ordinary teenagers do, seeing their friends and so on, they're vulnerable to these gangs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to note there that, you know, we work with a lot of young people who are at sexual exploitation, and, you know, we've been right at the centre of quite a few quite high-profile grooming gangs where we've accommodated and we've managed those young people, but we're very much a therapeutic environment, so we try to enable those young people to get their life back and find stability and move on.
So the last thing you want then is anybody who has anything to do with these gangs to be anywhere near your front door. But tell us what has happened.
Yeah, I think you've got to put it in context as well, Peter, that if you looked across all of the care sector, you know, including the NHS, there is a national crisis today that we are significantly short of people who want to work in the care sector. Recruitment and retention is actually the biggest crisis that faces it at the moment. And so that increases the challenge, doesn't it? That when organisations are desperate for people to work in this place, that makes it even easier for these people to infiltrate and find a way in to access and gain significant access to very vulnerable young people. Our experience, probably like a lot of others, we have experienced year after year that people who are part of these gangs or people that are linked to these gangs will try to make a way in, whether it be recruitment or supply services to you. It's not uncommon. I think you also know that we had a very recent story that extended members of the Rochdale grooming gang only last year. So this is in recent time. Given those events started 20 years ago, they were still trying to gain access to our organisation by way of recruitment. It was a difficult challenge for us. I think you've seen some of that material in the sense that unfortunately those people didn't show up on those national registers that we all have access to safeguard and improve safety of recruitment. So that was the biggest challenge.
So you're in a situation where you're trying to keep particularly young girls, but young boys as well, completely safe. You're struggling to recruit people because of the nationwide issue with people working in care, and you're getting actual applications for jobs from people who are in those rape gangs.
We've definitely had applications from people who are known and in those gangs. They've tried it under pseudonyms, false names. We're normally very good, along with the local authorities and the police, are picking that stuff up. The challenge becomes, it's when extended members of that gang who have not committed a previous offence, not been caught, they are used then as the next applicant and it makes it incredibly difficult. So only last year, as I mentioned before, we had extended members of the Rochdale grooming gang trying to make access by applying for jobs, which would have given them significant access to very vulnerable young people. It was only through really our own high levels of vigilance that we were able to safeguard that and protect that happening.
So how difficult is it? Because we hear all the time about safeguarding, about disclosure and barring services, checks. I've been through them. I volunteer with a young man who's in the care system. As a thing I'm sure you're familiar with called independent visitors. I'm one of those. You know, I had to go through all sorts of checks, employer references and various things. But there can be people who get through the system or who at least try to. How vigilant do you have to be, and how much support do you actually have in all of this?
I think it's important to note that the system has been safer and stronger than it's ever been before, that's for sure, right? But unfortunately, it's almost impossible to close the gap entirely. And I would say your vigilance really is down to your time, your own resources, and having to do a lot more work. I think one of the things that, you know, you think about how we discovered those people, it was the fact that they were recognised from a TV documentary in the background of what's taken place.
I mean, that just shouldn't be the way that this happens. But you actually saw people and thought, well, you've been on the telly, you've been in these, you've been in this documentary.
Yeah, I think, Peter, it's important to say that it's only really, that's down to good luck, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
that we have good
but that shouldn't be the way. What about the police? What about local councils? What about all the organisations that are meant to be supporting you in all of this?
So every local authority has a department called LADO, which is the local authority designated officer. And I've got to say, they're generally really, really good, and you have good relationships with them. But in this instance, those people did not come up on those LADO checks, okay? Unfortunately, I have to tell you that they were actually known to the police, but that intelligence didn't travel all the way through to the local authority.
So it's not a joined up system then?
No, I'd have to admit that in that situation, it was broken. I would also highlight it was unusual, but it does highlight the problem exists. And, you know, I don't know.
And was that in regard to the Rochdale grooming gangs? I mean, how close have people come to working in your centre?
I've got to say, they've not become close, because what we try to do is, it's not the only checks you would do. You're mapping out all of their working career, and wherever there's a gap, or there's something not explained, it leads you to ask further questions. And I think really good employers and organisations will do that anyway. But that's where you then become more vigilant, you ask more questions, and you push things further to get more of a background. And that's what, in this situation, led us to be far more vigilant and check something out, that we didn't feel there was a full story. But you are right, it was good luck and good fortune that prevented that from happening.
So what if you don't have good luck and good fortune? What if you're an organisation, maybe not your organisation, but another organisation that has these absolutely shameless, evil people trying to get access to children to recruit them for rape gangs? I mean, how vigilant do you need to be? What advice would you give to people watching you maybe work in your sector, or people who just want to help in some way to actually try to identify these people?
Well, the first part of your question is, I think it's incredibly difficult because, and it has happened where these people have managed to get access through jobs and services. It's happened. It's not as rare as you might. The damage, it's wide. I think the most important thing we need to consider is that, you know, the damage to those young people, because they've already got broken trust. They've had a lack of faith in the system, a lack of faith in the people. That's echoed, isn't it, in the recent failures with the inquiry.
Yeah.
It's probably reflected as well by the Minister for Safeguarding and the challenges that Labour government's got at the moment with it. So it's really important that when we're in those positions that we have to try and reinstore that faith and that trust with these young people and protect them. I think generally most will have good working relations with your LADO departments at local authority. I've got to say that we go to extra lengths to keep those relationships open all of the time. But I think you have to go to almost, minutiae of checking somebody's working history and referencing those things, because, people do change names. People try and change their working history.
Just paint a picture for me, Paul, about we're told. I mean, Keir Starmer talked about this in the past tense in Parliament a few weeks ago. This is happening right now, isn't it? Is it as bad as it was? Is it worse? Is it better? Are the authorities getting any grip of it?
I think it's better in terms of how local authority are managing those situations. So just turn it back a little bit. One of the big challenges, particularly with the Rotherham and the Rochdale situation, was these young people were not believed. Mm-hmm. That's the first problem. So that part of the system is much better. So, you know, we should always believe a young person until proven otherwise. So I think that part of it has got much better, and local authority social services has gotten much better at that part of it. But it doesn't change the fact, Peter, that, you know, all of the organisations that then manage these young people and are responsible for their safety and their rehabilitation, they are still vulnerable to well-organised people who have real gumption for giving it a try and not being deterred to apply for access to get to these young people. That is still happening. My view, not everybody's view, I think there would be a better system if we almost passported people to work in this care sector, and that passport would travel with them. It's something that you would easily reference from an employment point of view. I don't think that would be a difficult system to set up, but that would give us far more insight into a person's background and history when they've worked in the care sector. Why they might have left previous jobs, why they might have been disposed of from previous jobs, for that matter.
Yeah. What about the inquiry that's coming up? Do you have confidence in it?
I've got to say, not a great deal of confidence, because, you know, look, it's gone on too long already. I mean, it took 7 years, didn't it, to get the inquiry? And then when we get it, with 20 clear recommendations, you know, there was 19 the government said they would take on. For whatever reason, it stalled.
Yeah.
Key people who were survivors of that abuse, I think they voted with their feet, haven't they? Lack of faith, lack of confidence.
And speaking of those survivors, speaking of vulnerable people who your organisation looks after, what's their attitude to this when they see these stories, when they hear these stories of people who've infiltrated organisations such as yours or tried to infiltrate that? How do you keep them safe? Do you say to them to flag anything? I mean, what sort of messages do you give to them to try to keep them safe from their perspective, especially when these gangs are still preying on these young people?
I think it's really tough, Peter, because this is a really good example of, you know, young people back then had to give evidence and they had to remain available. The system's changed for the better. They can give evidence and be left alone now. The challenge is anybody who's involved with any court matter, they live it for all of the time it goes on. That took 20 years to start with. They were living that. We still are very much involved with a couple of young people now. They're in their early mid-20s. We'll have that ongoing relationship because they need that level of support as well. But generally they feel let down because, I mean, Peter, it stands out for itself. In 20 years, what is the significant changes? We haven't seen any.
Paul, you've given us an awful lot to think about today, and I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the work you do. I know it's not particularly well paid. I know it is very difficult. I know you've got to be vigilant all the time. So, Paul, please keep doing what you're doing. Keep those young people safe in every way that you can. And thank you for speaking out on this really important issue. That's Paul O'Rourke there, who's the Managing Director of Next Stage Youth Development that provides support living services for young people aged between 16 and 18 in the North West and West Yorkshire. I am just appalled, but kind of not surprised, because given the arrogance, the presumption, the chippiness and the evil of these people who exploit, who rape children, and they're trying to worm their way in to the very organisations that are meant to keep them safe. It is absolutely disgusting, it is wrong, and more needs to be done. Paul clearly is at the front line there, and I found that absolutely horrifying, but simultaneously fascinating and dreadful list of things that he was saying there. What do you think about it? 0344 499 1000. Would love to hear your views on all of this. We'll take more of your calls. We'll hopefully hear from Shabana Mahmood, the Home Secretary. You never quite know when these things are actually going to happen in the House of Commons, but as soon as she starts talking, we'll bring that to you here on Talk.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Shamara Mahmood, the Home Secretary, is on her feet in the House of Commons right now.
The world is a more volatile and more mobile place. Huge numbers are on the move. While some are refugees, others are economic migrants seeking to use and abuse our asylum system. And even genuine refugees are passing through other safe countries searching for the most attractive place to seek refuge. The burden that has fallen on this country has been heavy. 400,000 have sought asylum here in the last 4 years. Over 100,000 people now live in asylum accommodation, and over half of refugees remain on benefits 8 years after they have arrived. To the British public who foot the bill, the system feels out of control and unfair. It feels that way because it is. The pace and scale of change has destabilised communities. It is making our country a more divided place. There will never be a justification for the violence and racism of a minority. But if we fail to deal with this crisis, we will draw more people down a path that starts with anger and ends in hatred. I have no doubt about who we really are in this country. We are open, tolerant, and generous. But the public rightly expect that we can determine who enters this country and who must leave. To maintain the generosity that allows us to provide sanctuary, we must restore order and control. Rather than deal substantively with this problem, the last Conservative government wasted precious years and £700 million on their failed Rwanda plan, with the lamentable result of just 4 volunteers removed from the country. As a result, they left us with the grotesque chaos of asylum seekers housed in hotels, shuttled around in taxis, with the taxpayer footing the bill. My predecessor as Home Secretary picked up this dreadful inheritance and rebuilt the foundations of a collapsed asylum system. Decision-making has been restored, with a backlog now 18% lower than when we entered office. Removals have increased, reaching nearly 50,000 under this government. Immigration enforcement has hit record levels, with over 8,000 arrests in the last year. The Border Security Bill is progressing through Parliament, and my predecessor struck a historic agreement with the French, which means small boat arrivals can now be sent back to France. These are vital steps, but we must go further. Today we have published Restoring Order and Control, a new statement on our asylum policy. Its goals are twofold. Firstly, to reduce illegal arrivals into this country, and secondly, to increase removals of those with no right to be here. It starts by accepting an uncomfortable truth. While asylum claims fall across Europe, they are rising here. And that is because of the comparative generosity of our asylum offer when compared to so many of our European neighbours. This generosity is a factor that draws people to these shores on a path that runs through other safe countries. Nearly 40% come on small boats and over perilous channel crossings, but a roughly equal number come here legally via a visitor, work or study visa and then go on to claim asylum. They do so because refugee status is the most generous route into this country. An initial grant lasts 5 years, which is then converted almost automatically into permanent settled status. In other European countries, things are done differently. In Denmark, refugee status is temporary, and they provide safety and sanctuary until it is possible for a refugee to return home. In recent years, asylum claims have hit a 40-year low. And now, across Europe, countries are tightening their systems in similar ways. We must act too. We will do so by making refugee status temporary, not permanent. A grant of refugee status will last 2.5 years, not 5. It will be renewed only if it is impossible for a refugee to return home. Permanent settlement will now come at 20 years, not 5. I know this country welcomes people who contribute, and for those who want to stay and are willing and able to, we will create a new work and study visa route solely for refugees, with a quicker path to permanent settlement. To encourage refugees into work, we will also consult on removing benefits for those who are able to work but choose not to. Outside of the most exceptional circumstances, family reunion will not be possible, with a refugee only able to bring family over if they have joined a work and study route and if qualifying tests are met. While over 50,000 were granted refugee status in the last year, more than 100,000 claimants and failed asylum seekers remain in taxpayer-funded accommodation. And we know that criminal gangs use the prospect of free bed and board to promote their small boat crossings. We have already announced that we will empty asylum hotels by the end of the Parliament, and we are exploring a number of large military sites as an alternative. We will now also remove the 2005 legislation that created a duty to support asylum seekers, reverting to a legal power to do so instead. While we will continue to support those who play by the rules, those who do not, be that through criminality or antisocial behaviour, can have their support removed. We will also remove our duty to support those who have a right to work. It is right that those who do receive support pay for it if they can. So those with income or assets will have to contribute to the cost of their stay. This will end the absurdity that we currently experience, where an asylum seeker receiving £800 each month from his family and who had recently acquired an Audi was receiving free housing at the taxpayer's expense, and the courts judged that we could do nothing about it. Mr. Speaker, these measures are designed to tackle the pull factors that draw people into this country. But reducing the number of arrivals is just half of the story. We must also enforce our rules and remove those who have no right to be here. This will mean restarting removals to countries where they have been paused. In recent months, we have begun voluntary removal of failed asylum seekers to Syria once again. However, there are still many failed asylum seekers here from Syria, most of whom fled a regime that has since been toppled. Other countries are planning to enforce removals, and we will follow suit. Where a failed asylum seeker cannot be returned home, we will also continue to explore the possibility of return hubs, with negotiations ongoing. We must remove those who have failed asylum claims, regardless of who they are. Today, we are not removing family groups, even when we know that their home country is perfectly safe. There are, for instance, around 700 Albanian families living in taxpayer-funded accommodation, having failed their asylum claims. This is true despite an existing returns agreement, and that Albania is a signatory to the European Convention on Human Rights. So we will now begin the removal of families. Where possible, we will encourage a voluntary return, but where an enforced return is necessary, that is what we will do. Where the barrier to a return is not the individual nor the UK government, but the receiving country, we will take action. I can announce today that we have told Angola, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and Namibia that if they do not comply with international rules and norms, we will impose visa penalties on them. And I am sending a wider message here. Unless other countries heed this lesson, further sanctions will follow. Much of the delay in our removals, however, comes from the sclerotic nature of our own system. In March of this year, the appeals backlog stood at 51,000 cases. This government has already increased judicial sitting days, but reform is required. So we will create a new appeals body staffed by professional independent adjudicators, and we will ensure there is early legal representation available to advise claimants and ensure their issues are properly considered. Cases with a low chance of success will be fast-tracked, and claimants will have just one opportunity to claim and one to appeal, ending the merry-go-round of claims and appeals that frustrate so many removals. While some barriers to removal are the result of process, others are substantive issues related to the law itself. There is no doubt that the expanded interpretation of parts of the European Convention on Human Rights has contributed. This is particularly true of Article 8, the right to a family life. The courts have adopted an ever-expanding interpretation of this right, and as a result, many people have been allowed to come to this country when they would otherwise have had no right to. And we have been unable to remove others when the case for doing so seems overwhelming. This includes cases like an arsonist sentenced to 5 years in prison, whose deportation was blocked on the grounds that his relationship with his sibling may suffer. And more than half of those detained are now delaying or blocking their removal by raising a last-minute rights claim. Article 8 is a qualified right. That means we are not prevented from removing individuals or refusing an application to move to the UK if it is in the public interest. To narrow Article 8 rights, we will therefore make 3 important changes in both domestic law and our immigration rules. Firstly, we will define what exactly a family is, narrowing this down to parents and their children. Secondly, we will define the public interest test so the default becomes a removal or refusal, with Article 8 rights only permissible in the most exceptional circumstances. Thirdly, we will tighten where Article 8 claims can be heard, ensuring only those who are living in the UK can lodge a claim rather than their family members overseas, and that all claims are heard first by the Home Office and not in a courtroom. We will also pursue international reform of a second element of the European Convention, the application of Article 3, the prohibition on torture and inhuman, degrading treatment or punishment. We will never return anyone to be tortured in their home country. But the definition of degrading treatment has expanded into the realm of the ridiculous. Today we have criminals we seek to deport, but discover we cannot because the prisons in their home country have cells that are deemed too small, or even mental health provision that is not as good as our own. As Article 3 is an absolute right, a public interest test cannot be applied. For that reason, we are seeking reform at the Council of Europe, and we do so alongside international partners who have raised similar concerns. But it is not just international law that binds us. According to data from 2022, over 40% of those detained for removal claimed they were modern-day slaves. This well-intentioned law is being abused by those who seek to frustrate a legitimate removal. So I will bring forward legislation that tightens the modern slavery system to ensure that it protects those it was designed for and not those who seek to abuse it. Taken together, Madam Deputy Speaker, these are significant reforms. They are designed to ensure our asylum system is fit for the modern world and that we retain public consent for the very idea of providing refuge. We will always be a country that offers protection to those fleeing peril, just as we did in recent years when Ukraine was invaded, when Afghanistan was evacuated, and when we repatriated Hong Kongers. For that reason, as order and control is restored, we will open new, capped, safe and legal routes into this country. These will make sponsorship the primary means by which we resettle refugees, with voluntary and community organisations given greater involvement to both receive refugees and support them, working within caps set by government. We will also create a new route for displaced students to study in the UK and another for skilled refugees to work here. And of course, we will always remain flexible to new crises across the world as they happen. I know the British people do not want to close the doors, but until we restore order and control, those who seek to divide us will grow stronger. It is our job as a Labour government to unite where there is division. So we must now build an asylum system for the world as it is, one that restores order and control, one that opens safe and legal routes to those fleeing danger across the world, and one that sustains our commitment to providing refuge for this generation and those to come. I know the country we are. We are open, tolerant, and generous. We are the Greater Britain that those on this side of the House believe in, not the littler England that some would wish we would become. These reforms are designed to bring unity where others seek to divide. Madam Deputy Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition,
Kemi Badenoch is going to respond for the Conservatives now.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I thank the Home Secretary for advance sight of his statement, most of which I read in the Sunday Telegraph, actually. But I am pleased that she is bringing forward measures to crack down on illegal immigration. It's not enough, but it is a start, and it's also a change. It's a change from her previous position in opposition of a general amnesty for illegal migrants. But I do want to praise the new Home Secretary, Madam Deputy Speaker. She's bringing fresh energy and a clearer focus to this problem, and she has got more done in 70 days in the job than her predecessor did in a year. She seems to get what many on the benches behind refuse to accept. She is right to say that if we fail to deal with the crisis, we will draw more people to a path that starts with anger and ends in hatred. But we will also allow our English Channel to operate as an open route into this country for anyone prepared to risk their lives and pay criminal gangs. This is not fair. It is not fair on British citizens, it is not fair on those who come here legally, and it is not fair on those in genuine need who are pushed to the back of the queue because the system is overwhelmed. Anyone who cannot see by now that simply tinkering with the current system isn't going to fix this problem is either living in la-la land or being willfully obstructive. It is a shame that it has taken Labour a year in office to realise there is a borders crisis. Yes. I don't know why they're chuntering. What was their first act in government? Her predecessor's first act was to scrap the Rwanda plan, which was already, yes, they're cheering, it was already starting to act as a deterrent before it even got off the ground. And before it started, Labour threw away all of our hard work, the taxpayers' money. They're the ones who have wasted their money, not us. But this statement, Madam Deputy Speaker, is an admission that her predecessor's immigration and borders bill will not work. But I'm glad to see them now changing course. The powers they're using in this bill, they all voted down when we were in government. They wouldn't be able to do that if we hadn't got it through. None of them know the work that was done. They're just cheering nonsensically, but we know what has happened since they came into office. In fact, the Home Secretary will know that in the 70 days that she has been in office, 10,000 people have crossed the channel. And in the last year, we have seen record levels of asylum claims. The problem has got worse since Labour came into office and is getting even worse by the day. But I am afraid to tell her that what she is announcing is not going to work on its own. And some of these measures will, in fact, take us backwards. I say that to her with no ill will, and I hope she believes me when I say I genuinely want her to succeed. Because on this side of the House, we are speaking from experience. We know how difficult this is. It is, we are. And we're not going to take any lectures from the people who voted down every single measure to control immigration. Some of the measures she is announcing today, Madam Deputy Speaker, are undoubtedly positive steps. Baby steps, but positive nonetheless. We welcome making refugee status temporary, and we welcome removing the last Labour government's legislation that created a duty to support asylum seekers. She's right to do that. Yeah. However, some of what she is announcing simply does not go far enough. On this side of the House, we believe that anyone who arrives illegally, especially from safe countries, should be deported and banned from claiming asylum. Does the Home Secretary agree that anyone who comes to this country illegally should be deported? I'd like to know, I think the country would like to know, because this announcement means that some people who arrive will be allowed to stay. They just need to wait 20 years before getting permanent settlement. That does not remove the pull factor. But the main problem is that for as long as the UK is in the ECHR, Illegal immigrants and those exploiting our system will use human rights laws to block anything she does to solve this. I know this because I saw it happen again and again over the last 4 years. I know she is seeing it too. We even saw it this year with the Prime Minister's one-in, one-out scheme, which has seen people return to France come back yet again on small boats. I can guarantee that her plan to reinterpret Article 8 will not work. We tried this already. Strasbourg and UK case law will prevail. And I agree with her that the definition of degrading treatment is overinterpreted. But renegotiating Article 3 internationally will take years. Years we don't have, if it were even possible, but the fact is, it isn't. We know this because a small group of EU countries tried this earlier and they were dismissed by the Secretary General of the Council of Europe. Her government did nothing to support them. So I'm not convinced that it's the Prime Minister's negotiating skills that are going to sort out that problem. The fact is, we have looked at this issue from every possible direction, and the reality is that any plan that doesn't include leaving the ECHR as a necessary step is wasting time we don't have. Just like their plan to smash the gangs or the one-in, one-out policy, it is time wasting and it is doomed to fail because of lawfare. We have seen this all before. The tough measures will be challenged in the courts and blocked. The new legal routes she's talking about will be exploited, and the numbers arriving on our shores and disappearing into the black economy will keep on rising. If the Home Secretary is serious about reducing these numbers, and I do believe that she is, she must be bolder. She must take steps to deter illegal immigrants from coming to Britain and deport them as soon as they arrive. Our borders plan does just that, and I know that she has studied it in detail. I've seen the looks. I know that she knows that we would leave the ECHR and ECAT to stop the Strasbourg court from frustrating deportations, that we'd establish a new removals force to make sure all illegal arrivals are deported. We would end the use of immigration tribunals, judicial review, and legal aid in immigration cases. Those are the things that are slowing us down. And we will sign returns agreements that are backed by visa sanctions to ensure we send illegal arrivals back to their place of origin. I welcome what she's talking about on Angola and Namibia, but all of us in this House know that they are not the ones creating the biggest problems. We need to be bold, serious, and unafraid to do what the British people demand: secure our borders. That is what is in our borders plan. So I urge her to take me up on my offer to work together. Not just because we have some ideas she might find useful, but because, judging by her own backbenchers' reaction today, she may find our votes come in handy. Earlier this year, we saw what happened when the government tried to make changes to the welfare bill. The Prime Minister was defeated by his own backbenchers and ended up passing legislation guaranteeing that more money would be spent on welfare. And it doesn't appear that his grip on the party has improved since then. So you can be sure that the MPs behind the Home Secretary are already plotting to block any serious changes she tries to make. We can help her with that. Why are they shaking their heads? We've seen them do it time and time again before. I would say to the Home Secretary, this is a genuine offer in the national interest. We will not play the same game they did, voting things down for no reason, but she must be clear with the House on these questions. How many people will be able to take advantage of the new work and study visa route? And what will the level of the cap be? Will it be 10,000 people? Will it be 100,000 people? The government has separately confirmed they will allow Gazan students to bring dependents. We oppose this, but can she clarify how the government will ensure that people brought to the UK from a territory under Hamas control are not a risk to our security? If she finds that the Human Rights Act and ECHR prevent her from enacting these proposals, will she use primary legislation to resolve this? Has Lord Hermer agreed? By her own admission 3 weeks ago, the Home Office is not yet fit for purpose, so why then are we creating the new legal routes for the Home Office to run? And will she take me up on this serious, genuine offer to meet and discuss how we can work together to resolve this asylum crisis, yes or no? I urge her to put party politics aside, meet with me and my shadow Home Secretary. Let's find a way to work together.
Order. I was very generous with time then. Home Secretary.
Thank you. Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for her response to the statement. I see that the Shadow Home Secretary has been subbed out after his performance at Home Office orals. But whether it's the Shadow Home Secretary or the Leader of the Opposition herself, I'm very happy to take on the Conservative Party any day of the week. And let me start by saying we will not be taking any lessons from those opposite on how to run an effective migration system or indeed an asylum system, because I'm afraid to say to the Leader of the Opposition, she knows that her party in government gave up on governing altogether. They gave up on making asylum decisions, creating the huge backlog that it was left to this government to start to deal with. And in our first 18 months in office, removals are up 23% compared to their last 18 months in office. So I will take no lessons from anyone opposite on anything to do with our asylum system, because they simply gave up and went for an expensive gimmick that cost 700 million quid, returned 4 volunteers and was doomed to failure from the start. I will also say, Madam Deputy Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition had rather a lot to say about the European Convention on Human Rights. I don't recall the members opposite ever bringing forward any legislation to deal with the application of Article 8, the qualified right to a private life, in this House. There was never a bill that sought to clarify the way that Article 8 should apply in our domestic legislation or indeed in our immigration rules. So I'm not going to take any lessons from the people that just never bothered to do that in the first place. It is this government that is rolling up our sleeves, dealing with the detailed, substantive issues that we face and thinking of proper, workable solutions to those matters. And I just say on Article 3, I think the position on Article 3 has changed across Europe. I was over at the Council of Europe in my previous role as Lord Chancellor just before the summer recess earlier on this year, and I was struck by the sheer range of other European partners who want to have this conversation. It is important, I think, that the British government leans into that conversation and seeks to work in collaboration with our European partners. The one thing that will not work is simply saying we're going to come out of the European Convention altogether. That is not and will never be the policy of this government, because we believe reform can be pursued, but that this is an important convention, not least because it actually underpins some of our own returns agreements, including the one with France. And so she talks about how many years it would take for us to think about reform of the convention, but it would also take just as many years, as she well knows, to start renegotiating lots of international agreements which would be affected by us coming out of the convention. So I'm afraid her solution once again will not work.
The Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood speaking there in the House of Commons. We're going to leave that and go to the Shadow Home Office Minister and Conservative MP for Stockton West, Matt Vickers, who's been listening to all of that. Matt, what do you make of what Shabana Mahmood has said here? Your party leader, Kemi Badenoch, says that it's fine, some of it anyway, some of it doesn't go far enough, and actually a lot of it won't be possible without withdrawing from the ECHR. Shabana Mahmood, we've just heard her saying that is a long, drawn-out process, would take a heck of a lot of time and would affect many, many other agreements as well. How practical are these plans?
I think, do you know what? There's small steps. There's lots of gimmicks in there as well. The reality is that this government's approach to immigration has been characterised by gimmicks. You know, we haven't seen much gang smashing going on, and then we had the one-in, one-out deal. Well, since this started on that deal, 16,500 people have come into the country, and only 99.5% of them have got to stay. It's not much of a one-in, one-out deal. I think there are things in here that you can welcome that are a step forward, but they're nowhere near radical enough to deal with the crisis.
What do you actually welcome? What will you work with the government on, Matt?
I think, well, we're willing to look at what we've said there. It sounds like the Labour Party are going to have problems getting this legislation through. They've already got a list sort of running up already today of people who are coming out publicly against it. And I'm sure there's lots of conversations going on behind the scenes with lots of other people. There's a few ministers on resignation watch. We've got people about to launch leadership campaigns left, right and centre in the Labour Party. So there's a big party management issue for them there. It's not. I don't think there'll be a huge amount of confidence that they can actually get this through the House without the support of other parties. So there's big question marks around that.
There may well be, but would you end up voting for something you actually don't wholly believe in, the extension of safe and legal routes, for example?
So you saw the offer there from Kemi to work with the government to look at what we can do together, where we can find common ground that works in the national interest, that we both would believe could actually help solve the problem. But the reality is, this is a huge crisis. It requires a radical response. And what we're not hearing today about those people who are arriving in the country, our approach is that if they're arriving in the country, they should not have the right to stay come what may if they arrive illegally.
But you could end up voting for a bill, and your party could end up voting for a bill that doesn't actually go as far as you want it to. Okay, it may be something in the middle, and never let the good be the enemy of the perfect necessarily, but how are you going to square that? How are you going to negotiate with the government? Are they actually going to listen to you? And what bits of this do you like and what don't you like?
I don't think we can be sure that they're going to listen, but the reality is people sat at home now are as frustrated as I am about this situation. They're frustrated by the pressure on our public services, the pressure on housing, the pressure on our public finances, and what is seen as a mickey take, the fact that people can literally rock up on our shores and expect to be put up in hotels. We need to solve this crisis. It has to be solved. It's the responsible thing to do for Kemi to offer to get around the table, have the discussion, to look at how we can take things forwards in the national interest. But the reality is, these proposals do not go far enough to solve this crisis. You need to be at the point, the only way to solve it, if you speak to the National Crime Agency, the only way to solve it is with a deterrent. The people need to think before they get in the boat that they will not be able to stay. If they think that they're going to pay people smugglers thousands of pounds to break into this country and then get sent away anywhere, they're not going to do it. They need
so
to
one of the key tenets.
Okay, we also need to make the place a lot less. It needs to not be the land of bread and honey, you know?
Well, let's get down to brass tacks here, Matt. Name me one thing that you like about this, one provision in this bill that you think you could support the government with.
So I think we are supportive of seeing extensions to the requirement for ILR to make it harder for people to gain indefinite leave to remain in this country. We welcome that as a principle. In fact, we brought forward motions on that and amendments on that to make that a longer period.
So this is the extension from 5 years to 20 years, but you still could eventually get citizenship.
Yeah, well, we're saying, so the bit of it that we're opposed to is people who arrive illegally. We're saying that for people who have arrived illegally, it should be tougher to get indefinite leave to remain. You should have been seen to have paid into the system for longer. You should have been seen to comply and contribute. But what we aren't saying is that people who arrive here illegally should get to stay, which is essentially what's being said there, that if people break into the country and make an asylum claim, that would be considered, and these people should go. The principle that we see is that if you break in, you shouldn't get to stay.
Okay,
and that is how you stop people breaking into the country. That is how you stop people coming illegally, by telling them, unless they do it in a sensible way, a legal way.
But so nobody illegally should get any indefinite leave to remain. There's no way the government is going to agree with you on that, are they?
Well, that's what we believe should happen. We believe
that's fine, but they're not going to agree with you on that.
That's what they want to see. It's common sense. If people know that they will not get to stay in this country, they will not get in those boats. That is the only way.
I agree with you on that point. I agree with you on that point.
The public out there with any ounce of common sense, no, you need to stop people breaking in.
And that's fine, and I agree with you on that. But the point is, I don't think the government are going to agree with you on that, and you're going to get a hodgepodge of measures. What about these countries like Angola, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Namibia, and visa penalties to say that people that if they don't take people back, well, then their visas will be restricted? Is that something you support?
Well, we agree with visa sanctions. It was an amendment we put forward. It's something we've talked about. In fact, we put legislation in place during the last government to create the ability to undertake visa sanctions. It is there in legislation now. There is an ability to do it. We've said that this should be part of the mix, because we know that where people are sent home, for instance, the Albania deal, we know that where people were arriving, it was a huge destination, a huge place from which people were arriving. We had got a deal in place. We're sending people back, and all of a sudden, the number of people arriving fell by 93%. It's not rocket science. People, when those agreements are in place, people will stop coming. When we have a place in which to send people back to, they will stop coming. Visa sanctions are part of that deal. If countries out there aren't going to play their part, aren't going to take back criminals or people who break into our country, then there should be visa sanctions, and that's how we get these people around the table. That was a principle we put forward. That's something we've argued for, so obviously we welcome that.
If the government extends safe and legal routes, if it has additional safe and legal routes after, there are 3, I think, at the moment, Hong Kong, Ukraine, and Afghanistan, if they extend those safe and legal routes, would you vote for this legislation or not?
We are deeply... Well, you heard the questions there from Kemi. I haven't heard the answers, actually, because we haven't heard them yet, but you heard the question marks from Kemi around that. If you're creating new routes, how are you going to cap them? How are you going to make sure that the people who arrive in this country are not a security threat? You know, these are actually really big questions that are part of such a thing. The objective is
so if that's in the legislation, you won't vote for it. Is that what you're saying?
The reality is we need to reduce the number of people coming to this country. We need to be convinced that can happen. You don't need to be expanding access points and opportunities for people to come to. You need to look at how you reduce it. And at the moment, there's not that much amongst this that would make it appear that there's going to be a huge reduction. We've said...
And that's a key point of what the Home Secretary is saying. She says this whole plan will reduce illegal arrivals. Do you think that's true?
I'm not convinced that this is radical enough to make a significant dent. It might put people off. It might change the way in which people react when they get here. But actually, we know that you need a deterrent. You need people to think they can't stay before they get in the boat. If people think they can come here, it's going to be a little bit more robust, but probably they'll get through. And then in 20 years' time, they're going to carry on doing it. We need that deterrent.
What is the percentage chance you think that it's likely that the Conservatives end up voting for this legislation?
I haven't heard Shabana's response. I haven't been party to these negotiations. There's not all that much detail in the statement, so I'm not going to give you a percentage. I mean,
there's a 32-page document that no doubt you were looking at earlier on with all the provisions in it that's been out now for 3 or 4 hours. Have you not looked at that?
We've said what we will do is we'll sit down, we'll look at it, there'll be discussions. We've said we will engage the government. It's the right thing to do to try to get them to a point where we think that this thing is in the national interest. This is a crisis, but the reality is we don't think it goes far enough. It needs to be significantly more radical. It needs to be a bigger deal if it is going to put an end to this huge crisis and this huge cost to the British taxpayer.
Matt, thank you. That's Matt Vickers there, who's the Shadow Home Office Minister and Conservative MP for Stockton West. Thank you to Mike in Lincoln, who says, listening to the statement and response in Parliament, I'm reminded of 2 cats fighting in a sack over policies that the progressives in their parties won't let them get through Parliament, be it the left of Labour or the One Nation Tories. They'll block anything sensible that the electorate actually want, says Mike. Nicola in Norfolk says, the Home Secretary has just shown how nasty and petty Labour are. Kemi made a fair and reasonable response to the statement, and yet her offer to meet and work together was met with the usual, we won't take lectures for the Conservatives. I'm sick of petty party politics being put before the national interest, says Nicola. Margaret in Birmingham says, Peter, I told you, she said, we're a tolerant country. Yes, we have to, because they put migrants before the British people. She needed to say, I will detain and deport and I will stop the boats. Another gimmick and more waffle from Shabana Mahmood, says Margaret. Chris says, I feel like cheering this woman. Common sense, finally. Glenn in Colchester says, what am I missing here? There are plenty of facial recognition systems out there. You don't need to worry about change of names, etc. If these rape gangs you were talking about a bit earlier, members were in the system, it takes a second to scan their face, says Glenn in Colchester. So thank you for that. I just cannot understand the Conservatives working with Labour, says this person, when the Labour benches blocked everything the Tories wanted to bring in Rwanda and stopping migrants getting deported via the European Convention on Human Rights. Jane says the Home Secretary can't change her views that much. Does she believe it herself? Or is this just a lever to become Prime Minister? Shabana Mahmood certainly saying slightly different things to what she was saying a few years ago. In fact, diametrically opposite to what she was saying a few years ago. So very, very interesting on that side of things as well. She is still answering questions in the House of Commons. There are all sorts of MPs from all sorts of parties who are asking her lots about the detail of this plan. Well, thank you to everybody else who's been in touch on the BBC. Jane says, how many times has the BBC done this to others? Not so much recently. I've watched Parliament Channel Live, seen the news report later. Didn't match what was seen. One word can change everything. Peter in Suffolk, talking about Trump, says, whether Trump wins or not, we still have to pay our licence fee, so let him go ahead. And PG in Sunderland says, my brother, who's a staff nurse, was knocked out of bed at 4:30 a.m. by 4 police officers about his car number plate being illegal. This is after Maxie Allen, the man we spoke to earlier, who was arrested. 6 police officers came and arrested him and his partner. His children had to be looked after by someone else as they were held by police for over 12 hours. He's now being given compensation for wrongful arrest. He was complaining about his daughter's school. PG continues, the officers were in 2 marked police cars which they stopped dead in the middle of the road. Bizarrely, we have cars with no insurance dumped on our street belonging to drugs gangs, and the police are not interested in the uninsured cars, says PG in Sunderland. Well, thank you for all of that. We'll continue to monitor what's happening in Parliament. We'll also ask about democracy. democracy, the very nature of democracy. And if 16 and 17-year-olds get the vote, if they have polling booths in schools, if they're allowed to vote over a number of days, how would that change things in terms of who gets elected and where? We'll talk to Joe Twyman, the pollster, about that. And Grace is going to join us. Grace Dyer, who's 17. She's doing A-levels in history, politics and business, about what she thinks as a young person about perhaps getting the vote. Stay with us.
When Reform announced policies that were milder than Shabana Mahmood is confirming today in the House of Commons, we were deemed racist and bigots. But now the current Home Secretary can announce it, and apparently that's all fine. The pure hypocrisy of this desperate Starmer regime in its bunker in number 10. But I think maybe Shabana Mahmood has... maybe she's actually now in the wrong party. Maybe she needs to cross the floor.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your calls, texts, tweets and voice notes in a minute or two. But now on Talk, we're going to talk about the fact that teenagers may vote at school under an election overhaul. Mobile polling booths are going to be placed in schools to make it easier for 16 and 17-year-olds to vote for the first time as part of a shake-up of Britain's election rules. This is being planned by ministers. This is to modernise the voting experience. In-person polling could be extended over several days, while hubs will be set up to catch voters in busy areas. This is an interesting one because at the moment it's always on a Thursday. Do you know why it's on a Thursday? Because lots of people used to be paid weekly. They get paid on a Friday, and a Thursday was the time when they were most likely to be sober. So when the extension was extended to working age men, women came later, of course, that was the idea behind it. Now, there are lots of views. The government says we're exploring ways to securely modernise voting and polling stations to make voting more efficient and convenient for eligible voters and meet expectations of modern public services. Well, what about John Major talking about the stubby pencil in the voting booth, and is this change a good idea? We'll talk to a 17-year-old in a second. Her name is Grace Dyer, and she is studying history, politics and business. But first of all, I want to speak to Joe Twyman, the founder of Delta Poll, the big polling company. Joe, if these young 16 and 17-year-olds vote, however they do so, first of all, what do you think of the changes that are being proposed? Will more people vote as a result, do you think? And also, who are they likely to vote for?
Well, that's a really good question. I think the changes are certainly to be supported if you're going to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote. And of course, it is an if. But if you are going to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote, you want to do as much as you possibly can to ensure that they are able to vote, and that all of the barriers...
Joe, we're just having a bit of a problem hearing you. I think there's an issue with the microphone. We'll maybe allow the people behind the scenes to deal with that, and we will come back to you. That's Joe Twyman there from Delta Poll. We'll talk to him in just a second. So let's go to Grace now. She's 17 years old. She's studying history, politics and business at Portadown College, the greatest of all grammar schools in Northern Ireland. Has produced some seriously good people like Rory Best, for example, and me. Grace, great to talk to you. What do you think about this? Perhaps having the vote at 16 and 17, first of all, do you support that, Grace?
Well, I think myself personally, I would have voted at 16, but I'm not sure how much I would support a lot of my peers for voting at 16, just sort of seeing what we're all like in school especially.
So you think a lot of your friends and pupils at your school wouldn't necessarily see that as something they would necessarily want to do you think?
I think a lot of people would want to do it, but I'm not sure if wanting to do something and being able to do it properly or right or in a way that properly reflects you are the same thing.
And what do you think? I mean, you study politics. I know there's a great politics department at Portadown College, but there are lots of, and you of course are very aware of all the different issues in politics. But what about your friends who aren't studying politics? Are they political? Do they care about politics?
Well, politics, I think, is something that affects everyone because politics is something from you don't have a bus service in your area or the shop closes early at night. So I think that politics in that way people care about, but I'm not sure that people, and I don't think it's an age thing. I think just in general, a lot of people aren't very well informed, but I know that it definitely does affect 16 and 17-year-olds more so than it would affect people over 18.
Are there a range of opinions as well? I mean, I'm going to talk to Joe about this in a second, but a lot of people say, oh, young people, they're all tree huggers, they're all going to vote for left-wing parties. But is there a range of different opinions amongst your peers in school?
Well, I definitely do see a range of people. Like, I think it goes extreme in both ways, and then you have people in the middle as well. But I do think there is a point that a lot of people who are especially younger, 16, 17 in school, do lean one way or the other, whether that is tree huggers or not. I'm not sure, but I do see definitely extremes.
Okay, Grace, I'll come back to you in a second. I just want to hear what Joe says. We have the issue with this microphone sorted out. Joe, perhaps I could ask you the question again, what you think of this idea to have perhaps polling booths in schools for children. I mean, of course, there are lots of schools that are used, they're closed for the day usually so people can vote. I know my local primary school is the place that I have often voted, but voting at 16 and 17-year-olds as well, who are they likely to vote for, Joe?
Well, firstly, I think it's a really good idea that these sort of initiatives are being set up, because if you are going to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote, and I stress if, you want to minimise the costs of voting as far as possible. And by that I mean you want to make it as easy as possible, because there's an awful lot of evidence to show that if you do not vote the first opportunity you get, the likelihood is that you won't then vote in subsequent elections, and vice versa. So we want to get young people into the habit of voting, and so setting up in schools is an obvious way to help achieve that. I don't necessarily think it will solve the problem, but anything that can be done is beneficial. As for who young people will vote for, well, it's a really difficult question to answer. The likelihood is that 16 and 17-year-olds are probably going to vote in a similar way to 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Historically, that has meant that they've been more in favour of left-wing parties. But there's a lot of evidence to suggest that at the next election, it might, and I do stress might, be the case that that younger people are more interested not in left or right, but in established parties versus anti-establishment parties. And there's a lot of evidence in other countries to suggest that that means more to the right for young men and more to the left for young women. So what we could be seeing at the next election is perhaps greater support for reform among young men in this country and the Greens among young women. But as I say, that's only speculation, and we have a long time to go until the next election, and young people have an awful lot of time to make up their minds.
I'd like to ask both you, Joe, and Grace about this, about social media and how influential social media is on young people, whether that's Instagram, TikTok, however, whatever it is. Because Nigel Farage, for example, has more followers on TikTok than Ed Davey, Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch put together. So when you're polling people, Joe, where are they saying they're getting their actual information from that demographic and that age group?
Well, you're right that it is a big difference based on age group. Older people, for instance, overwhelmingly likely to get their news and information from radio and from television. But for young people, increasingly, it is about social media. And that can be everything from streaming video sites like YouTube to more short-form stuff such as TikTok. But it's certainly true that established, for want of a better expression, mainstream media tends to be less popular among young people when it does come to getting news and information.
Grace, where do you get your news from?
Well, I obviously study politics and stuff in school, so I think taking that into account, it's definitely an anomaly, because it's not like I'm going to quote TikTok or something in an essay I'm doing, so I do think I would read a lot more newspapers and watch a lot more mainstream media than other young people, but I think as a whole, there's a lot of information from, as Joe said, TikTok and YouTube and just short form content for 16, 17-year-olds as a population and as a generation.
And what are the issues that you and your friends care about? I know you're obviously more interested in politics, you're studying it for A-level, but are there other people around you who are maybe not that political, but who care about maybe one particular issue?
I think the main issues you see are things just down to your local area. It's things like support within schools. It's things like bus services to get you into school either later or earlier. It's like facilities that young people use, so like gym memberships and stuff, or even just stuff as simple as shops being close to you, or like driving lessons, just genuine things that young people care about more so than people who already have access to those.
And so many of our viewers and listeners here at Talk feel very disconnected from politicians. I know you have the Northern Ireland Assembly, obviously, but Keir Starmer's the Prime Minister of the whole United Kingdom. How relevant it's different for you, of course, as a politics student, but how relevant to your friends who are maybe less political see someone like Keir Starmer or Kemi Badenoch or even Nigel Farage to their lives and how they live? Or do they seem like remote figures, Grace?
I think, to be completely honest, they are very remote figures, and I think a huge part of that is age gap, but it's also just relevance in daily life, that a lot of the laws that they're passing, a lot of the stuff that they're talking about doesn't seem like it has a huge impact on your life. They don't have the same issues and the same priorities that we have as teenagers.
And Joe, could 16 and 17-year-olds in any part of the UK actually change things really in terms of how Parliament goes, or presumably in council elections, if you manage to carry the whole sixth form of a school, well, that could be a few hundred votes which may make the difference perhaps in a council election or even in a Westminster election?
Yes, you're right that in the case of very narrow contests, and particularly the next election where we could potentially have constituencies which have 3, 4, even 5 parties battling it out for victory, small differences could be important. But you can't get away from the fact that 16, 17-year-olds make up a very small amount of the electorate. So even if they were all to vote and were all to vote for the same party or in the same way, they would need to need a relatively close contest for it to make a difference. But in individual constituencies, that could certainly be the case. It remains to be seen exactly how large that impact is, but it's definitely there potentially.
Grace, I'm not going to ask you who you'll vote for because that would be an unfair question, but are you looking forward to voting? Is that something you actually look forward to? Because when I was a total nerd and loved the idea of actually being able to vote for myself, and I just wonder if that's something that you're actually looking forward to.
Yeah, I think it's something I'm definitely looking forward to, but I like the fact that I'll definitely feel prepared going into it, and I hope that other people, even when they are 16, are getting the support that they need to feel prepared for it. But just personally, I think it's a great thing to be able to vote.
And where should that support come from? You're obviously chosen to study it, but what about people who haven't got a political thought in their head, who don't really care about the news, who aren't particularly interested in those kind of issues you're talking about? Should schools have to teach them things like citizenship? Should they be encouraged as much as possible to vote? What do you think should happen, Grace?
Well, when it comes down to support, I think subjects like LLW should definitely have a bigger place in schools.
What's that? Sorry, learning for life and work, is that right?
Work, yeah.
Yeah, sort of citizenship kind of stuff. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And while we do have a couple periods a week that are outside of your GCSE or your A-level subjects, I think it should have a larger place in school. But the thing that I think schools especially need to be very careful with is sort of that blend between support and coercing, or like telling you what you should vote for, or putting more influence or more effect in other parties, because I think that's something really easy to do, especially within school or even at home. So it is just, I think, to me, the most important thing would be finding a balance between support but not pushing an agenda.
Grace, you're clearly a young woman who thinks for herself, and I hope all your peers will too, as if they get the vote at 16 and 17. Thank you very much indeed. Very articulate young woman with a bright future. Grace Dyer there, 17-year-old who's studying history, politics and business at Portadown College, and Joe Twyman there, who's, I'm sure he has a bright future as well. He's just a bit older, who's the founder of Delta Poll. Thank you so much to both of them. Joe says, regarding votes for school kids, under 18s can't decide whether they're male, female, animal, vegetable or mineral, let alone which political party is the best one to lead this country to greatness or otherwise. Absolutely insane and so desperate for votes, says Joe in Shrewsbury. Well, I don't think Grace particularly fits that, to be honest. I think she's a young woman who has her mind made up, although there are maybe others as well who are that age or older who have that view too. Richard says they are clutching at straws. Labour need to go. Yes, immigration is a massive issue, but what about the rest of the bonkers policy like net zero? Never mind the fact they're bankrupting us. Even if they stop the illegals, it's not enough anymore. And Mark from Long Eaton says, Labour says we need to unite the country over illegal immigration. That's hypocritical when the government can't even unite. Great show, Cardi P, says Mark. Well, thank you to everybody who's been in touch. We're going to take a peek inside the Sun next to see how they're covering the big stories of the day. We'll get plenty of reaction from you as well. 0344 499 1000. Whatever you want to talk about on the air between now and 7 o'clock, do get your call in. We'll get back to you and we'll get as many voices on the air as we can. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's take a look inside the Sun tomorrow. I'm delighted John Lucas, the night news editor, is with me again. Hiya, John.
Evening.
Tell us about the figures that just don't add up when it comes to immigration.
That's right. So obviously Shabana Mahmood's been setting out her stall on this tough new regime to tackle the migrant crisis. So I'm sure you've been talking about it all day.
Yeah, we heard her speaking in Parliament as well about 45 minutes ago.
Yeah, lots and lots of detail about this. But we were already looking at some of the costs that are accruing with the way that we actually handle the migrants who are leaving the country, who are ready to be deported. So it's eye-watering. We're paying £1.5 million a week just to transport people around the country to different centres.
Just on transport?
Just on transport,
okay.
Yeah. So this is working out, it's worked out 54.4 million for the first 8 months. So this is escorts taking them to airports, to different detention centres.
That's just one aspect of this.
It's just one aspect of it. It's incredible. And then when you look at what's going on within the centres, obviously services need to be provided in there. It isn't a prison camp at the end of the day. But it's quite incredible the money that's being spent on art, IT lessons, there's maths lessons, and the argument that the government make is that, well, once we've removed people, we don't want them to be tempted to come back again. So we want to give them skills to make a living back in their home countries. But I mean, is that something that the British taxpayer really should be paying for? Another thing that's going to be in our investigation tomorrow is some of the detail about healthcare provision at the detention sites at Heathrow Airport. So at the moment, the government are hiring 2 GPs to look after just 800 detainees. It's 139 grand a year for the lead doctor, 134 grand for the for their assistant, which obviously is fine, but if you look at the general population, you've got 1 GP for every 2,250.
Not 1 to 400
taxpayers, not 1 to 400. So it's when Shabana Mahmood is talking about division in society and people looking at this issue, the unfairness within it, this is exactly what she's talking about. I mean, and we're going to have lots more facts and figures.
And this is what I get on this station all the time. It's not about racism. It's not about prejudice. It's not about saying that if people want to legally come here and if there are skill shortages and they can contribute to this country, that they're not welcome in reasonable numbers. It is more than anything else about the fairness aspect, and you've identified that, and I'll be very interested to read that in the Sun tomorrow. Let's talk about Andrew Mountbatten-Windsor. He broke cover yesterday.
Yes, so first time we've seen him for a while. Have to remember, not Prince Andrew.
That's right.
Formerly Prince Andrew. He's had everything stripped from him. He's still in the grounds of Windsor, so he's been out riding today, and it's just a couple of days. If you remember, in the States, the US Senate asked him to come and give evidence.
Yes.
And they gave him this, I think it's a 20-day deadline, which expires on Thursday.
Right.
Don't think he's.
It's not going to happen.
He's not paying any attention to that. He's not going to.
And this is the irony with him, in that he always says, "Oh, I'm happy to help, and I'll make sure I'm made available." He never has. He's never told the whole story, and I think, from his perspective, I'm sure his lawyers are telling him not to go to America because he may well be lifted.
That's it, and it's all coming out. The Epstein stuff is still coming out in drips and drabs. Lots of very embarrassing further detail about Andrew's come out over the last few days. And lots of stuff. Trump's taken an absolute battering from his own MAGA people. Real loyalists have turned around and said, this is outrageous. We need to start releasing all the files. And Trump, it does seem Trump has said to the Republican Party, look, let's just vote and get them all out. We've got nothing to hide. It's going to be a Democrat problem. So if that does happen and we get the full release of all of the Epstein files, then that will be, potentially we'll see even more information about Andrew in those in the next few days, so that'll be an interesting one to keep an eye on.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. Let's have a look at some of the perhaps lighter stories that you're looking at in the paper tomorrow. The Cambridge Dictionary has crowned parasocial the word of the year. What does parasocial mean?
Parasocial. Now, this is a word that's apparently been around since the 1950s. It's an academic word.
Never heard it before.
Never heard it before, and it's to do with people who might look up to someone, a celebrity or an author or a radio, TV presenter, and start to feel that because they know them so well, they feel familiar with them, that they've got some sort of actual relationship with
without
them.
having communication with them.
Without ever having dealt with them. So it's almost like a super fan.
Yeah, yeah.
Can be like an obsessed super fan, and it's become the word of the year because celebrities are starting to sort of push back against their parasocials. So
right.
People who are not quite stalker as such, but Taylor Swift has had some, and who else?
So this
Chapel Rowan has hit.
So this
back
is a sort of one-sided relationship. So if the celebrity or the public figure, whatever's in touch with them, if they're corresponding in some way, that's not this. This is people who think they know Taylor Swift when they really don't.
Yeah, and Chapel Rowan and Justin Bieber have had them. Bieber's spoken of feeling like a zoo animal over some of this stuff because people come up in real life as well. It's not just an internet thing, and you know, in a very familiar way, want to grab selfies and stuff like that. But it is all you know, connected to the age of people living a lot online, living through their phones and social media.
And we've seen some of that as well. Some of these celebrities are just walking along and someone, you know, grabs them by the shoulder, gets a selfie or whatever. That must be very, very invasive. Must be a very...
Exactly. We saw that the other day, didn't we, with Ariana Grande?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
And there were other words that also were in the running. Again, skibbity, of skibbity toilet fame. Again, we still don't know what it means. Delulu was in the running, and AI slop as well.
AI slop.
These videos you'll see now every time you go on Instagram. Mad things happening, but they look very, very realistic.
Yeah.
AI slop is the word.
We have to be really, really careful here about, as I know you guys do too as well on your website and so on, with seeing stuff that looks like a story, but actually isn't. Something that also certainly isn't there is chocolate. There's less chocolate in these pouches of Heroes roses, and twirls have been cut by 10% from 300 grams to 270 grams by Grinch-like chalky bosses. This is outrageous shrinkflation. I won't have it.
Outrageous, and at Christmas time, you know, look, we always used to wagon wheels shrinking every year.
Everyone thinks they are, but are they? That's my question. Well, I remember, you know what, I was working on a programme in Northern Ireland once, and I had to ring up. There's this particular brand of orange, it's a bit like Fanta, called Club Orange in Ireland, and someone said they thought it tasted differently, and I had to ring the press office and say, does Club Orange taste differently now? And this press officer was going, well, no, I mean, it's just someone saying that isn't a news story. I said, well, yeah, but it's one of our viewers and listeners at that station at that time who was saying, well, maybe it does, so we're checking. But she was sort of exasperated by this, but clearly the shrinkflation, changing these things, changing recipes as well of different chocolates and things, it's a big issue.
Well, look, this is real, so if you're... some people have started already getting your Christmas shopping in, getting all the goodies in.
Bought my stamps today.
Yeah, exactly. You want your pouches of Heroes, Roses, Twirls. They've all been cut by 10%, so from 300 grams down to 270 grams. But it's shrinkflation because the price is staying the same, about £5. And, you know, we've had Which on, they've said that households are under this big financial strain, and it's not fair. You know, it feels like pennies, but it's very frustrating because a lot of salaries, as we know, haven't kept up with inflation.
Yeah, exactly.
And, you know, in that sort of situation, last thing you need is getting less for your money.
Absolutely.
So,
well, keep an eye on it, and we will. Don't feel you've got to spend more than £5 on my Christmas present, John. I know you've been thinking of little else over the last while. That's John Lucas, who is the night news editor at The Sun. Thanks very much indeed. You can get all the stories in the paper tomorrow or on the website, thesun.co.uk. They'll be put up online over the next few hours. Let us know what you think of them too, or anything else we're talking about today, whether it's Donald Trump, the BBC, or vote to 16 and 17. Chris in Cambridgeshire says, I think giving 16 to 17-year-olds the vote is ludicrous. Most kids that age don't even know what they want to do in their future. Giving them a vote is just a desperate attempt for Labour, we've heard Labour, I haven't heard Fielber before, to get votes. I don't think it will increase bullying school based on political views, which is just wrong. I also think it will increase bullying in school based on political views, which is just wrong. Schools also seem to be coercing children to certain ways or views over the past few years when their job is to teach them in a non-biased way, says Chris in Cambridgeshire. And one more before the break, Peter in Shrewsbury, he says a vote should be restricted to 21 years old or an individual who has paid tax and national insurance for the last 12 months. As a parent of children this age, they say they don't want to vote. They're afraid of voting as they don't know about politics. This is a Labour Party, again, afraid of losing their jobs instead of for the good of the country. They're traitors to this wonderful country. They should bow their heads in shame. If they had 1 ounce of patriotism in their body, they would read the room and act as people want them to. Well, plenty of opinions coming into the building. Lots more coming your way in just a second here on Talk.
When Reform announced policies that were milder than Shabana Mahmood is confirming today in the House of Commons, we were deemed racist and bigots. But now the current Home Secretary can announce it, and apparently that's all fine. The pure hypocrisy of this desperate Starmer regime in its bunker in number 10. But I think maybe Shabana Mahmood maybe she's actually now in the wrong party. Maybe she needs to cross the floor.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thanks everybody sending in your voice notes today. We've had quite a few. Let's get a selection of them. Steve has this to say on the BBC.
Just interested in this £5 billion suitcase from Donald Trump to the BBC. It would be interesting to see how much we pay out in compensation from the police not doing their job properly every single year. That's public funding money as well. Equals to $5 billion? Maybe they've got a similar case.
Steve, I think that's a really, really good point. I also think the BBC is a case dancer, and there are so many people who sue them for things like wrongful dismissal. They, often drag out the cases. This will be the case in many, many public sector bodies because they just have the money to do it. If you're a business, for example, and someone sues you for unfair dismissal, you want it to end as quickly as possible before even it goes to court or a tribunal or whatever. And often public bodies, because they have the fees to do so, just drag it out. But it's our money. So I think it's a really good point, Steve. Let's hear what Dale has to say on asylum reforms.
So I've just actually finished watching the exchange there, and yeah, okay, they're doing something about it. It's too little, too late in my eyes. It's no use the opposition standing up and saying, "Oh, it's taken them XYZ amount of time to realise they need to do something about it." Well, sorry, what were you doing for the last 14 years? And then further making a point saying that it's getting worse and worse and worse. Well, of course it is, because they inherited a broken system that they did nothing for 14 years. It's too little, too late. I don't, from my point of view, I would never have an idea of how to resolve it myself. But that's why we've got politicians in power, and yet they don't even have a clue. So what are we supposed to do?
Dale, thank you for that. Let's hear Daniel in Epsom on asylum reform as well.
What the Labour and Conservative Party don't seem to understand while they're tinkering around the edges on the immigration issue is the British majority don't want and have never wanted illegal immigration. We want it stopped like 10 years ago. We want it ended. Why are you paying our money out to house and clothe these people that we don't want here? It seems insane. They're tinkering around the edges. They work for us, and the British majority have had enough.
I think a lot of people feel the same way, certainly, Daniel, and that is along the lines of the policy of what the Conservatives now say they would do, they didn't do in 14 years, and what Reform UK say they would do, and they're riding high in the polls at the moment and may well be the next government of this country. Lots on voting at between 16 and 18. Stuart in Bushy says if voting is allowed by 16 to 18-year-olds in schools, what measures are going to be put in place to ensure they are free to vote as they wish, not unduly influenced by others in that environment? Well, there is a statutory duty. It is illegal for teachers to try to influence people, but we know, of course, that doesn't always happen, influence them in terms of their voting habits, but we know that doesn't always happen, and we know that there have been teachers who've brought children to the Labour Party conference, for example, protesting about political issues, which is completely unethical and wrong. Martin in Lichfield says, good evening, Peter. Good evening, Martin. Voting in school, how about left-leaning teachers or lecturers pushing this political ideology onto students? Also, community influence or intimidation, especially in more ethnically diverse areas. It could be a great opportunity for parties who may take advantage of such a situation. Annie in Darlington, I'm not too keen on 16 and 17-year-olds voting. Most, and I say most, meaning the vast majority, are not experienced enough in life, not knowledgeable enough about current affairs, and too easily led by social media influence with all that attached rubbish. If they do get the vote, they should be treated as adults with all associated privileges and restrictions. They must pay taxes where applicable and be subject to the full weight of adult law with punishments befitting the crime. Keep up the great show, says Andy in Darlington. Andy, thanks for that. I wonder, and this is a controversial view, but there are a load of people who don't pay tax, don't pay any tax. Should they get the vote as well, or actually is there representation without taxation? Shimmy says if you give 16-year-olds the right to vote, you should also give them the right to do everything else you can do at 18 years old. If a 16-year-old is old enough to vote, they're old enough to make up their own minds, buy cigarettes, alcohol, get married without parental consent, drive vehicles. If you're old enough to vote, you're old enough to make up your own mind. It's as simple as that. And a couple of calls now on the BBC. Keith has been in touch from Huddersfield. Keith, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Good evening, Peter. Regarding the BBC fiasco, I'll first start saying that in 2016 I wasn't a Trump supporter. I didn't like him, and I'm not in love with him now.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't see why that people like myself, taxpayers, pensioners, should be sued for our money. I think the money that they're suing them for should come out of the people that have done it. Right? That's
so you think people like Tim Davie, the outgoing Director General, he should personally be liable for this stuff?
I think they certainly should, and people below them as well. They're not the only two. And if we don't sue them, they'll go and do it again, because they know they've no comeback. It hasn't cost them a penny, it's cost us.
Very interesting points there, Keith. Thank you. John's in Kent, and I think has perhaps a similar view. John, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Yeah, very much. Thanks for taking my call, Peter. It's exactly the same. I think what should happen is this Tim Davie and this other bird who've been on £500,000 for the last couple of years, they can put up the money, and I'm sure Lord Ali would like to chip in a few million.
Well, what's it got to do with him? What's it got to do with Lord Ali?
Well, he's one of their supporters, and he throws money about to start.
Well, to the Labour Party anyway. I don't think he's really anything to do with the BBC, John.
It's very much the same thing. Anyway, if they want to fight the case, they've got to find the money or crowd fund or something.
Okay. I'm not sure.
Taxpayer.
If
Don't expect the BBC
okay.
licence player to pay it. If they want to buy it, use their money, not ours.
Okay,
Yep.
Thank you, John. Much appreciated. Derek in Hertfordshire says in Australia and America they stopped illegal immigration in 1 week. In Hungary, Viktor Orban didn't let it start. The UK does not want to stop it. Why is that? Says Derek. Well, Shabana Mahmood says she does. Do you believe her? Mike in Lincoln just finally says I was going to buy them, but some Christmas chocolates until I saw the cost and size of the tubs and pouches. I binned the idea off. I will not be bothering again. These manufacturers will be doing themselves out of business if there are many people like me, says Mike in Lincoln. I, for one, bought some Christmas stamps today. Do you know how much it is, Tevin, to send a stamp, a Christmas card abroad? If you want to send my aunt in Australia, send her a Christmas card. £3.20.
£3.20, really?
£3.20 for a Christmas card. Anyway, I will still do it because she's a wonderful person.
But then the costs of Christmas cards, they're about like 10 quid each.
Well, not all of them.
They're just bits of cardboard.
Yeah, you should buy them from charity. I've bought mine from the Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation. Right, what's coming up on your show?
Well, I mean, we're going to look at, Shabana Mahmood's heart's in the right place, I suppose, but she won't leave the ECHR, so everything she's saying is a waste of time. And also, worse than that, none of this stuff stands a snowball's chance in hell of getting through the left-wing parliamentary roadblock of all those lefty Labour backbenchers.
Well, the Conservatives, I suppose, could help them, but that would be embarrassing for the government as well.
Well, they're going to vote this all down, and we're also going to have a look at, Shabana Mahmood's own background. This was a woman who 10 years ago went to the Greek island of Lesbos to hand out food parcels to all the illegal migrants coming in from the Middle East and from sub-Saharan Africa.
I wonder what it was about the prospect of becoming Prime Minister that first attracted Shabana Mahmood to change her mind.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that there's not enough right-wing people, or the right-wing wing of the Labour Party isn't strong enough or numerous enough to make her Prime Minister, so she's going all the way down the wrong angle.